for sound. That meant she was close. She listened one more time, trying to pinpoint the source, and less than a half-second later it came again. Right below her, she realized. 2, maybe 3 meters. She dove, forgetting how her lungs were burning, and blindly reached out. Her hands fastened around something slimy. It was about the size of her head, huge for a heart, and as Sakura brought her other hand down it bucked against her, beating violently. More blood was squeezed out of it as it did, rushing past her hand and joining the rest of the pit. This was the source of the blood, Sakura realized. This thing had been at the bottom of the pit, steadily filling it up the whole time. She fumbled for her pack, reaching for a knife. But the moment her hand hit her empty pack, pressing it into her back, she realized her mistake. She'd used up all her knives with Naruto while trying to slow down Haiden. Sakura felt a brutal red anger far redder than the blood around her take hold of her, and she took the heart in both hands, squeezing it as hard as she could. Her finger made deep divots in it, but it kept stubbornly beating, refusing to die. She wasn't strong enough to crush it into paste. This was the heart of a ninja, after all. Without hesitation, she turned around, tucking the heart to her own chest and swimming for the surface. It felt like the organ was resisting, trying to sink back to the bottom of the pit. Her head was aching. She was running out of oxygen. It only made her kick more viciously, driving herself towards the surface far faster than she'd descended. I'm not going to die on my first C rank, Sakura thought to herself, even though she knew this was anything but a C rank mission. I've got to tell my parents how it went. 20 seconds, 30. Sakura's whole body was aching, a migraine coming on. She was past her limit. She'd have to take a breath any moment now. Her body's instinct to breathe was stronger than her will to keep her mouth shut. But the darkness behind her eyelids was getting lighter. She was close. Don't breathe, she begged herself, swimming harder. The heart against her chest bucked even more violently. Don't breathe. Just go? Sakura breached going almost 20 miles per hour, and even though the blood was loath to give her up, she forced herself clear out of the pit and beached herself on the bloody stone surrounding it. She heard both her teammates jump back in shock. They were still alive. She took a ragged breath, unable to comprehend what was happening and unable to open her eyes. They were stuck close by the sticky blood. She couldn't see anything, so she decided there was no choice but to trust blindly. She raised the heart over her head in both hands and called out in desperation. "Sensei," she screamed, and she heard a scuffle, more steel on steel. "No," Haiden howled, and then her arms jerked back as something took the heart right out of her hands. The omnipresent moaning of the dismembered cultists ceased. The cavern grew quiet, and Sakura didn't know what had happened. Gingerly, she lowered her arms, waiting for someone to say something or for anything to happen, and tried to wipe some of the blood from her eyes. Someone else's hand was suddenly there, wiping her eyes clear with some water, and Sakura flinched back, almost sprawling on the stone and blinking wildly. The sudden light was painful after minutes alone in the dark. Hey, it was Naruto, standing over her and extending his hand. Sakura blinked, looking at him, behind him. Obito was standing over Haiden, stepping on his open throat. The man was lying on the ground convulsing, his eyes rolling back into his head. She looked back and found the heart. It was pinned to the wall of the cave, Obito's short sword transfixing it. He'd thrown his sword, Sakura realized. Her sensei had thrown his sword and impaled the heart in her hands. She took Naruto's hand, still staring at the heart. It was beating slower, and as she watched, stopped, its lifeblood dripping down the wall to join the rest on the floor. "Sakura," Obito said, glancing back at her. There was blood running in light trails from both his eyes, and he was as pale as paper. He looked totally exhausted. "Good work." Sakura smiled at him, and then he fell to one knee, seemingly about to pass out. "Obito," Sasuke rushed forward. "Is he dash?" "He's dead," Obito gasped. With his heart vulnerable like that, he made a sound that sounded like choking. Sakura realized it might have been a laugh. He was making a big play, and it backfired on him. Lucky for us. He tried to stagger to his feet and failed. Sasuke had to catch him before he landed on his face. "The merchants," their sensei said faintly. They've got to be here. They were going to be sacrificed. We've got to get them. We'll get them, Naruto declared. Actually, I'll get them. You guys rest, okay? He glanced at Sakura, and she realized that just like Sasuke, she must have looked frightening, entirely coated in blood. Just take it easy for a second, okay? Yeah, Sasuke confirmed. Find them, and shout if you need help. Sakura sat back with an exhausted nod, and Naruto took off, running off into one of the corridors with his boundless energy. Sakura tried wiping away the blood from her face and gave up after several passes. There was just too much of the stuff. She closed her eyes again, letting her head drop. She felt like she could fall asleep right there. She was so warm and so tired. But she couldn't. Even if the danger had passed, the mission wasn't quite completely. Still, her consciousness drifted. By the time Naruto came back with an excited yell, she was barely able to hear him. They're all alive, he said. Pretty beat up, but alive. Awesome, Obito said. He looked a little less pale, and he waved off Sasuke as he pulled himself to his feet. Awesome. Show us the way. It took a long time for Sakura to wash all of the blood off. 10 merchants had gone missing from Paper Hill, and Naruto had found 9 of them. The last, a man named Yako, was dead, killed by one of the cultists, just as the pinned woman had claimed. None of the merchants had known what had happened to his body. It hadn't been taken with them. They were all in relatively good shape, though none of them had eaten in at least 2 days. They'd been kept alive and unharmed, and nothing more. When Obito had asked them if their captors had told them anything, they'd all agreed that Haiden hadn't done much more than preach to them. The man had told them they were the key to his immortality. That had made Sakura shiver. Haiden already hadn't been able to die by normal means. Whatever the ritual beneath the lake had been trying to accomplish, she had her feeling that her team had accidentally averted something catastrophic. It had taken them about a half hour to find their way to the surface. Obito had been too tired to carry them out with his Kimui. The merchants had all given Sakura and Sasuke frightened looks when they'd been led back to the main chamber by Obito. Sakura had never had someone look at her with fear before. She'd given the woman in the front a smile, thinking that maybe this was Haruka, and she'd flinched. Sakura had been a little offended, but now, in the water, she could understand. If a girl covered in blood had smiled at her, white teeth against dried red blood, she probably would have flinched away too. Okay, we're taking these guys back, Obito had said when they'd finally emerged from the cave system. It had spat them out in the forest, somewhere Sakura didn't recognize. Sasuke, you're up front. I'm in the back. Naruto and Sakura, left and right. It was a standard diamond formation that they were taught early and often in the academy for the purpose of escorting VIPs, and falling into it helped Sakura forget she was still covered in warm, sticky blood. Her arm ached constantly. Sakura had never been hit with a shuriken before. Was it really supposed to hurt that much? Every step she took, she left behind a bloody footprint, dimmer and dimmer with each step. This wasn't really how her first C rank was supposed to have gone. She was thinking all the way back to Paper Hill. It was supposed to be simple. She shouldn't have had to swim through enough blood to fill up a couple hundred people. That was just wrong. Distantly, Sakura wondered if she was in shock. Surely, she'd have a good excuse. But this didn't feel like shock, or at least what shock had been described like to her. She was just tired. Exhausted, really. All the adrenaline had completely worn off, and it left her with a deep and constant exhaustion. She barely remembered the trip back. It was late when they got back, and darker than ever. Sakura had lost track of time, but if she had to guess, it was probably close to 2 or 3 in the morning. There were 2 people standing guard at the bridge leading into the town, both armed with crossbows. Sasuke had probably given them a hell of a surprise, coming out of the dark and covered in blood. It was all a blur. The town had come alive, people streaming out of their homes to welcome them back. There'd been cheering, screaming, one woman crying. It had all washed over Sakura without making a single impression. She wanted nothing more than to lie down and fall asleep. But there was no way that was possible while she was still caked in blood, her hair clumping together and the space between her fingers sticky. Sakura, that had been her sensei, passing before her like a ghost. He was still incredibly pale. Sakura had wondered how close he'd come to succumbing to Haiden's endless attacks. If she'd been even a second slower, would they all be here, among this noise and celebration in the dark? You and Sasuke should wash off. Go to the river, okay? We'll find you guys a bed. Sakura had nodded, and then she was there, or now she was here. She was finding things a little confusing. The river was cold, but it wasn't waking her up. Sakura had gone in fully dressed, desperate to wash the blood off every bit of her and her clothes. She swam in slow laps, gradually getting pushed along by the lazy current, scrubbing at her arms and legging. The blood whirled off her in thick curls, practically invisible in the dark water. She pulled clumps of it out of her hair, running her fingers through it over and over, fruitlessly trying to get rid of all the tangles. She really was dumb, she suddenly thought. She'd brought 3 explosive tags down into the temple, and she hadn't used a single one of them. They probably would have come in handy against Haydn. Maybe if she hadn't been standing around, she could have done something useful. And now, she'd taken them into the river with her, ruining the paper. 3 out of the 15 tags she'd brought on this mission, wasted for no reason. Her arm really hurt. Sakura checked at her pockets, wondering what else she'd wasted. There was a lump in her left pant leg that she hadn't noticed in the commotion. She pulled it out, drawing it up out of the water. It was a tin. The tin her father had given her before she left, she realized. The blood had mostly washed off it, and it wasn't any heavier in her hands. Neither the blood nor the water had slipped inside it. That's right. She'd brought it when they'd left Karasen's house in case they'd ended up searching for too long and she got hungry. The bear had totally driven it from her mind. Sakura swam to shore, the tin still in her hand, and flopped out onto the mossy bank. She still didn't feel clean, far from it, but at least now she wasn't warm and sticky. She was sure her hair was stuck in an absurd mess. Who cared? It was too dark for anyone without chakra to see her anyway. She fumbled with the tin, feeling at both the catches on the side. It clicked open, and she peered inside, drawing chakra into her eyes to pierce the darkness around her. She didn't know what she'd expected. It was a sandwich, wheat bread with some meat, cheese, and lettuce sticking out the sides. Her dad always overpacked sandwiches. There were a half-dozen umebashi, picked plums, sitting alongside the sandwich, and a little chocolate, the kind that was rolled into a ball, wrapped in bright foil. There was a small roll of paper on top of the sandwich, and Sakura picked it up and unrolled it with damp fingers, staining the corners. Good luck. For when you're thinking of home, smiley face. Her father has accidentally capitalized the second letter in good and not bothered to fix it. Sitting on the banks of the river, still soaked but not feeling cold or warm, Sakura stared at the note as its edges gradually grew damper and lost track of time. Sakura? She jerked, almost dropping the tin. Naruto had crept up behind her. Either that, or she'd been so out of it she hadn't heard him approaching. He sat down next to her, staring at the tin. You all right? Sakura set the note down in the tin, looking between it and her teammate. Yeah, I think so. Really? Naruto asked. It was quiet, Sakura realized. How long had she been down by the river? The town had gone back to sleep. 'Cause that was pretty messed up. Sakura choked. It might have been a laugh. Yeah, I didn't. She lost track of the sentence, and Naruto glanced at her expectantly. I don't know. I didn't think it would be like this. She heard the footsteps approaching this time, crushing grass and spare twigs behind her, and twisted to watch their approach. Obito and Sasuke emerged from the dark. Their teacher still looked exhausted and pale, but he was walking steadily. Sasuke had managed to clean most of the blood off, but his hair was stuck straight up in every direction, as though he'd been electrified. Sakura giggled, and the Uchiha stared at her. She probably looked just as ridiculous, she thought, and a flash of self-consciousness burned her down. Let me tell you guys right now, Obito said, settling down on Sakura's other side. Sasuke walked ahead, looking out over the river. This is not what a C rank is supposed to be like. Well, that's a relief, Sasuke said, not looking back. I'd really rather not do that again. Same. Naruto shivered. I didn't even go in the blood. I don't know how you guys did that. We weren't thinking. Sasuke turned around. Right, Sakura? Sakura tried to remember exactly what had driven her into the pit of blood. She'd thought that she could do it. She remembered that, but beyond that sense of urgency and certainty. Yeah, she said quietly. We weren't thinking. You were so sure about the heart, Sasuke. I just jumped in right away. Well, Obito said, leaning back and lying in the grass. He looked and sounded like he was about to fall asleep. He was right. He sighed. What a mess. Well, hey, Naruto said. If this was our first C rank, all the others should be easy, right? He laughed, and the sound brought a bit of life to Sakura. Naruto had a nice laugh. It was guileless and loud, and couldn't be cruel. I mean, what? 20-something nutcases, some A-rank ninja dash. S-rank, Obito interrupted. Definitely S-rank. He pulled a small black book out of his pocket. It looked like a journal. I found him in here, he said, gesturing with the book. A bingo book? Sakura had never seen one before, but she'd learned about them. They held lists of all the notable rogue and foreign shinobi that were of interest to the Land of Fire. Obito was a Jonin. After all, it made sense that he'd have one. Haiden, no family name. Left Yugikure, the village of Springs, several years ago after killing some of his comrades. His profile said that he was extremely dangerous and had notable taijutsu skills. Nothing about being immortal, though. He put the book back. That must have been new. Whatever he was doing with his heart, he was probably trying to make it permanent. It made Sakura feel a little better to hear that, for some reason. They'd done some good. They'd killed a monster before they passed beyond mortality. That made it worth it, right? Geez. Naruto whistled. Hey, since we killed him, do we get his bounty? That would be pretty cool. Obito laughed. Didn't even think of that. You're a greedy little kid. You know that. Naruto stuck his tongue out at him, and the Uchiha sat back up. Well, I guess I can consider it, he said. We could split it 4 ways. How about that? I got the heart, Sakura thought, and the bitterness of the inner voice surprised her. I'm the one who swam to the bottom. That would be nice, she said out loud. How much was his bounty, sensei? Obito squinted, trying to recall. Around 5 million, I think. Something like that. Sakura blinked, and Naruto almost fell over. Sasuke was the only one who was unruffled, watching them both with a grin. 5 million. Split 4 ways, that would still be over 1 million each. 1,250,000. That was as much as she would have made on, like. Sakura's addled brain tried to do the math. Most of her D ranks so far had made her about 8,000 Ryo once the payment had been split up. 1,250,000 divided by 8,000 was. No chance. A lot of missions. A lot of money. She settled on that. Good enough. What do you have there, Sakura? Obito asked, peering at the tin in her hands. Sakura blinked, looking down at it. Some extra food, she said. My dad packed it for me. She found that she wasn't hungry at all. Do you want any? It's some umebashi and a sandwich. Her sensei smiled at her. I'm good, he said, waving her off. Appreciate the offer. Umebashi, Naruto asked, scooting over. Hey, that's the stuff you said you liked, right? How is it? Sakura was surprised. They'd made their reintroductions to each other when the team had first been formed months ago. Naruto hadn't really seemed like he was paying attention at the time, but he'd pulled that out so quickly. He must have been after all. It's a little bitter, she said, offering the tin. Naruto reached over and plucked out one of the plums, looking at it doubtfully. But it's good. It has a really nice texture. Naruto took her word for it and plopped the plum in his mouth. He chewed thoughtfully, his lips twisting. Yeah, he laughed. Definitely bitter. But it's not bad. The Hokage's son smiled at her, and Sakura felt a little less nauseous. How's your arm? Sasuke asked, and Obito's head jerked up. Her arm? He asked, and Sasuke glanced at him. You didn't notice? He asked, and Obito made a disgruntled face at him. I think I was busy fighting the immortal guy, Sasuke, he muttered. He looked over to Sakura. Did you get hurt? It was nothing, Sakura said, feeling a bit of shame. Naruto and Sasuke just had some scratches and bruises. Obito had been stabbed clean through the arm, but he didn't seem to give it much mind. Her own injury felt petty and stupid in comparison. I got clipped by a shuriken while we were running. I didn't even notice it. Let me take a look. Obito fully sat up, and Sakura presented her tricep. He took hold of it, gently rotating her arm and examining the cut. It had already stopped bleeding, partially scabbing over, but it was still 3 or perhaps 4 centimeters of muscle removed from her arm, and it stung constantly. You went in the blood with this? Obito asked, and Sakura nodded, biting her lip. I didn't think I had a choice, she said. You remember what I said about the lake, right? Her sensei murmured, his Sharingan spiraling out. He examined the wound with his Dojutsu, and out of curiosity Sasuke wandered over as well, doing the same thing. Sakura felt a little uncomfortable with two sets of swirling red eyes focused on her arm, but did her best to hold still. Yeah, she responded. Natural energy, bad, don't drink it. I remember. I didn't swallow any of the blood. That's good, Obito said. But it definitely got into your system through your arm. Sasuke, are you seeing this? Sakura startled, looking at both of the Uchiha. They didn't look concerned, just puzzled. I'm seeing something, Sasuke admitted. I've got no idea what though. It's a remnant, Obito said, releasing her arm. That blotch you're seeing is a sign that the chakra migrated into her system. Sakura flinched, and Obito frowned. His hand came up, next to her face. Do you mind? Sakura shook her head, and Obito pushed her head a little to the side, examining her face. His eyes glowed in the dark. Kai, he muttered, and Sakura felt a shock run from the top of her head to the bottom of her toes as her chakra system jumped at the sudden pulse from her sensei. He'd reset her chakra as easily as someone flipping a light on and off. Her teammates watched her carefully. Did they think she was going to go crazy or something? Sakura felt like a bug under a microscope. I'm not seeing anything, Obito admitted after a second. Sakura, do you feel anything? Anything weird? No, she said, pulling back. I didn't feel anything weird in the blood, and I haven't since. It hurts, but it's a little deep, so I think that's normal. She looked down. I was worried about the same thing, but I think it was nothing. I think when you stabbed that heart, the blood just turned back to normal. All those people died. Yeah, that sounds about right, Obito said with a frown. Sorry, we're just dealing with something pretty strange here, you know? I think you're fine, but when we get back, I'd like you to see a medic, all right? Just get a checkup, make sure nothing is blocked up or anything. Sound good? Sounds good, Sakura nodded. Cool, Obito said, looking like he was going to fall asleep again. Had using his Sharingan, even just for a minute, tired him out that much? Cool. Kurasen's offering us some beds. I say we take them and leave tomorrow morning. Get back and report the mission success, you know? Mission success. It sounded strange, but that was what it was, Sakura thought. They'd completed the mission, even though they'd come up against the worst possible situation. 24 crazed fanatics and an S-ranked ninja, all immortal to boot. But right now, they were the ones sitting by the river, alive and discussing what they'd do tomorrow, and all those people were dead. It felt kind of good. She'd get to go to sleep tonight, and they wouldn't. Right now, sleep was more appealing to Sakura than anything else in the world. All right, Sasuke said. Let's go then. And try not to wake Kurasen up. He directed the last comment at Naruto, who smirked. Ninja, he said, driving his thumb into his chest. I'll be quiet. And to his credit, he was. Even though they left early in the morning, Paper Hill was still there to see them off. It was a cold and dim day, looking and feeling like it was about to rain, but no one seemed to care. Thank you, Kurasen shouted as they crossed the bridge. Thank you for saving us from those devils. The whole town shouted in agreement, showering Team 7 with praise, and Sakura felt herself blush. Of course, Naruto was walking backwards, waving and jumping and shouting just as loud as the civilians. Thank you for the food. Have a good one. Obito just waved. Sasuke did the same. Sakura turned and made eye contact with Haruka. The woman didn't flinch this time. She smiled, and after a moment of hesitation, Sakura smiled back. She waved, and the town cheered again. It only stopped when they were out of sight. That isn't normal for C ranks either, Obito said with a grin. So don't get used to it. People usually aren't that glad to see shinobi. Why not? We're pretty cool, Naruto said, and Sasuke rolled his eyes. If shinobi are showing up outside the village, it means something needs fixing, he said, giving his friend a poke. Naruto swatted at his hand, and the genin nearly devolved into a slap fight before Naruto hopped ahead with a laugh. We got lucky this time. This was an easy fix. Next time it might not be so easy. Well, Sakura said, and her teammates looked at her. It might not be, but let's hope. She smiled. That was kinda nice. No kidding, Abito said, before suddenly snapping his fingers. He stopped, and so did his students. Hold on 1 second. Almost forgot the body. He whirled out of existence, and Team 7 was left alone in the woods. Man, Naruto said, looking around. Think there's another bear around or something? He laughed, and Sakura laughed too without much thought. It felt nice to just laugh at a stupid joke. It helped her forget there were still bits of coagulated blood in her and Sasuke's hair. All right. Abito swirled back into existence right where he'd been standing. Body secure. Now we can go. Team 7 headed back towards Kanahagakure and left Kami no soda, which they had saved from an unspeakable fate in the past. When Sakura got back home, she paused at the threshold to her family's home and scratched at the bandage on her arm. It itched. She wondered why she'd stopped, hefting her pack, and realized it was because she didn't want her parents to ask about it. Even though she desperately wanted to lie down in her own bed before she went to the hospital, if just for a couple minutes, she wasn't sure if she wanted to face her parents yet. Her mother would fuss. Her dad would ask what had happened. She took a deep breath and opened the door. It was unlocked. No one in Konoha would dare to rob the homes of a shinobi, and even if they were stupid enough to try, they'd be caught in short order. I'm home. Sakura waited for an answer, but none came. She took an uncertain step inside, slipping through the doorway. There weren't any shoes out in the entrance. She kicked hers off and set her pack down. Sakura walked down the hall, her feet cold against the wood floor, and stepped into the kitchen. There was a note on the table, a piece of paper curved into a V and propped up into a little roof with her father's scrawl on it. On a mission, it read, "Last minute. Should be back tomorrow. Left some instant ramen for you. Hope the mission went well." Sakura stared at the note. She felt like all the air in her lungs had just vanished without her having a chance to breathe it out. Her mother had left on a mission as well, a recon job, about 3 days before, with no indication on when she'd be back. Her father had just returned from one yesterday, and yet he was already back out in the field. She wondered if it was with Special Jonin Anko again. Her dad had said she was a tough leader, but he seemed to enjoy working with her. Alone in the kitchen, with nothing but another note from her dad, Sakura didn't know what to do. She didn't know whether to sit down right there on the kitchen floor, or head to her room, or just stand there for the rest of the day staring at her father's note. She might have been dreading it, she realized, but in reality the only thing she wanted more than her bed right now was her parents. Her face twisted. She turned around, stomping out of the kitchen and up the hallway stairs to her room. When she got there, she collapsed into her bed face first with a sigh. S-rank ninja, she thought to herself blearily. We ran into an S-rank ninja the very first time we left the village. What kind of luck was that? Her hair was still stuck together. Why was she lying down? Dumb. Just like ruining those tags. She couldn't even do things in the right order. Groaning, she rolled out of bed and wandered to the bathroom. The Haruno family shower had always been slow to heat up, and Sakura took her time undressing, her movements slow and sore. She only stepped into the water when the bathroom mirror had begun to fog over. The water was hot, probably hotter than it should have been, right on the threshold of enjoyable and painful, and Sakura felt her shoulders relax a little, the water pouring over her. She was still tense, she realized. S-rank ninja, hair still full of blood. Why wouldn't she be tense? Her arm twinged as she brought it up to probe at the mess that her hair had become. Stupid. You were stupid. You would have died if you hadn't hit that shuriken out of the air, and that was just luck. She felt a little faint. The water really was way too hot. She didn't change the temperature. Sakura ran her hands through her hair, wincing at the knots, and scrubbed viciously at her arms and legs, trying to get the last of the stains out. Up, down, up, down. Her arms were going automatically. She'd forgotten to grab any soap. She reached out for it, the motion feeling weirdly furry. She'd had to swim to the bottom of that pit. Sakura was sure she'd dream about that tonight, like she had the night they'd spent in Paper Hill. The heat, the weight, the darkness. The sound of Hayden's heart, the feeling of it bucking in her hands. She felt nauseous again and itched the cut on her arm, feeling the burn of the water running over it. It had finished scabbing over, but the water made it sting even more than before. What kind of luck was that? Well, Maybe it was a little lucky, since Obito had been with them. She'd have to go pick up the promissory note from the mission office after the hospital. When Team 7 had given their briefing with Obito to Irika, who'd been watching with disbelief the whole time, her academy teacher had told them to come back later for the bounty money. Even split 4 ways, it would take him a little time to get permission to issue it from the Land of Fire's government. She wondered what he'd thought of her. Irika was a Chunin. He must have noticed the blood left over on her and Sasuke. What could she do with the money? Sakura had never had that much money before. She'd be able to keep it. Her parents had promised her that whatever she made on her missions was hers to spend. She'd give some to them, of course. Sakura had no idea what she'd do with over 1 million ryo. Her family could afford to not run missions for months with that. Maybe that would be nice. Not months, but a week or 2, just relaxing. Sakura laughed, getting a little water in her mouth. Only one mission outside the village, and she was happy to sit in it for as long as she was allowed. The world was big, she'd known that, but she hadn't figured it would be so full of scary people. That was childish. Sakura rinsed the last of the shampoo out of her hair and then went for the conditioner. She scrubbed the remnants of the blood out, feeling the knots and clots with her finger, and watched it run down the drain. Her hands curled into fists before she shook them out. Focus, almost done. She ran her hands down the whole length of it more than a dozen times, working out all of the tangles. The villages were always fighting, and there were plenty of people besides them out there who fought each other too. There were criminals, crazies, ideologues, and everything in between out there. She'd just run into them sooner than she'd have figured. Sakura had just assumed that when the time came for her to really fight people, other ninja or otherwise, she'd be ready. That she'd have trained enough, or had some realization about the nature of the world that would make it easy. But that hadn't happened. She'd snatched up an S-ranked ninja's beating heart and offered it to her sensei like a blood sacrifice of her own, and she hadn't been any different before or after. She didn't have clarity now. She just had a headache and dirty hair and maybe some money later in the day. Sakura didn't really know what that meant. Maybe she wasn't smart enough to understand it, or maybe she was just too tired. She wasn't sure how long she was in the shower after that. Sakura stared at the drain, the water pounding the back of her head, until the heat faded and the shower began to run cold. She left the bathroom with 2 towels. The second was wrapped around her hair, trying to dry it out. She drifted back to her bed and slipped under the covers, sinking into her pillow. Her hair was growing cold against her scalp, but still, Sakura felt her eyes drifting closed. A nap couldn't hurt, she thought. 30 minutes. Then she'd go to the hospital for her checkup. 30 minutes would be fine. That'd give her the energy to manage the rest of the day. Her eyes closed, and she woke up 2 hours later. Sakura rolled over, groggy and even sorer than before, and sighed when she spotted her clock. Shit. When they were finished talking, Naruto and Sasuke found themselves sitting in silence for an uncomfortably long time. Their mothers watched them, both of them completely unreadable. When Naruto had gone home with Sasuke in tow, Mikoto had already been there, sitting with Kushina. They were poring over the barrier scroll that Kushina had been working on for the last several months. Kushina pacing and muttering to herself, and Mikoto standing as still as a statue, her Sharingan poring over every tiny detail of the barrier's ink. Naruto had been surprised. Usually Kushina visited Mikoto, not the other way around. Of his father, there'd been no sign. Gross, Kushina finally put, quite succinctly, and both Naruto and Mikoto laughed. Sasuke's mom leaned forward, looming over them. Both of their parents were on the couch, and Naruto and his friend were sitting on the carpeted floor in front of them. Well, Obito was definitely right, she said, looking at both him and Sasuke. Naruto had always thought she was pretty, even if the right side of her face was covered in burn scars. He'd never asked his mom how her friend had ended up with those scars. She was a ninja, he figured, and sometimes ninjas caught on fire. That's not even close to a normal C rank. I hope you guys don't get cold feet. Not a chance. Sasuke shook his head. But he frowned, and so did Naruto. He could tell something had been eating Sasuke up on the way home. Sakura and Sasuke were both a little quiet usually, which Naruto didn't mind. He had plenty to talk about no matter what. But when they'd been heading back to Konoha, they'd been extra quiet. It wasn't any surprise. They'd both gone in that pit. Naruto didn't know how he would have handled it. He wasn't afraid of blood, but he also wasn't afraid of, like, snakes. And if he'd been forced to jump into a really deep pit absolutely full of snakes, he was positive he'd come out happy to never see any kind of reptile ever again. Sasuke didn't seem like he was in shock or anything, but Sakura had gone all the way to the bottom and actually grabbed Haiden's heart. She'd just gone home, he suddenly realized. They'd all said they'd catch up later at the village gates and gone their separate ways, with Naruto and Sasuke going in the same direction. Sakura had just gone home. They hadn't invited her or anything. Well, that made sense. She probably wanted to see her parents, the same way he had. "We're pretty weak, huh?" Sasuke said, finishing his thought, and Naruto looked at him, his face scrunching up in confusion. He asked. "What do you mean? We did fine." "Obito did fine," Sasuke said as both their mothers watched patiently. "We would have died before we even understood we were in danger." "He's right, Naruto," Kushina said, and Naruto switched his confused look to her. "You all did very well, but it was just good luck, and Obito, that let you walk away." Naruto frowned. He knew she was right, but he didn't like accepting it. The academy had been kind of easy. If he wanted to learn something, he could buckle down and do it, so long as his parents kept him focused, and he'd be done in a week or two. It had always been that way. The academy was just school, but it still made sense to him that if it was easy, being a real ninja would have been too. But he'd almost died on his first real mission, and the only thing that had saved him was Obito being a real badass and Sakura being able to hold her breath for a long time. So obviously that wasn't a case. Being a ninja was way harder than learning to be one. "Okay," he said. "Yeah, that makes sense." He looked back to his friend. "So let's get stronger, Sasuke." Sasuke shrugged. "I don't think we have a choice, Naruto." His eyes grew a little darker. "I don't think I have a choice." Naruto flinched. Sasuke had told him, maybe a year ago now, what his mom Makoto had told him about Itachi. His friend was right. He didn't have a choice but to get stronger. He sometimes forgot that, even if it was fun to come up with fantasies about beating Sasuke's brother up for what he'd done. "Forgot about that," Naruto said, trying to draw Sasuke's thoughts off his brother. "Let's just make it so next time we can actually help Obito, instead of him having to protect us." Hopefully, Kushina chimed in. "That's not going to come up again." "Well, duh," Naruto said with a grin. "But just in case, right? If we're going to be Obito's students, we gotta try to surpass him. That's what Dad always says." Kushina laughed. "Good point," she admitted. "Well, what's your plan then?" Naruto jumped to his feet. "First, I'm gonna figure out Dad's jutsu." "The Rasengan?" Makoto asked. Naruto was glad to hear that she sounded a little surprised. His dad had told him that he was giving him an A-rank jutsu, the first he'd ever tried to learn, and if Sasuke's mom knew it right off the bat like that, then Minato hadn't been messing with him. Yup, Naruto started pacing a little, the same way his mom had been before they arrived. "He told me he'd teach me the next step after I figured out how to pop a water balloon with just my chakra. It's really tough, but I think I'm getting there." He stopped with a wide grin. "And once I've got it figured out, Sasuke can just copy it with his Sharingan." "It's not quite that easy," Mikoto said, looking at her son. "You know that, right?" "Yeah," Sasuke said quietly. "Even if Naruto figures out the jutsu, I'll need the chakra control to actually use it. I'm going to have Obito teach me water walking. I think that's a good place to start." Mikoto nodded, and Sasuke cocked his head. Did Obito go to the compound? He wasn't heading for his apartment. Obito, Naruto knew, was one of the very few Uchiha who lived outside of the clan's isolated compound. He'd asked Sasuke about it once, and his friend had shrugged and told him that his relative wasn't very popular with the rest of the clan and vice versa, whatever that meant. Neither of them were sure why. Obito was pretty cool, as far as Naruto was concerned. If most of Sasuke's family didn't like him, they were probably stupid or something. "I'm not sure," Makoto said. "He might have been going to visit the memorial. He usually talks with his brother a little after a mission." "Obito has a brother?" Naruto asked. He'd never heard any of this before. "Had," Makoto said quietly. "His name was Shursui." "Oh, right, the memorial. You didn't go there to talk to people who were still alive." Naruto shrunk down a little, feeling like he'd stepped over an invisible barrier. Makoto wasn't mad, and neither was Sasuke. They were both just sad. It made him uncomfortable. "What about Sakura?" his mom asked, and Naruto grabbed at the sudden lifeline to escape the awkward silence he'd created. "What do you mean?" Naruto asked, and his mom wrinkled her nose. "You and Sasuke are both gonna get stronger," she said. "You're gonna teach Sasuke the Rasengan. What about her?" "Oh," Naruto said. He blinked. He hadn't even thought of that. "I mean, I could, I guess. When we figure it out. I don't know if she's super interested in ninjutsu. Actually, he smiled, remembering the cave. She was really good with a sword." "A sword?" Kushina asked, and Naruto pantomimed the chikudo that Sakura had picked up, swinging the invisible blade around. "Yeah, it was awesome," he said. She grabbed a sword from one of the crazies and bam. He swung the imaginary blade again in a quick diagonal cut. Sakura had been a lot more scared, and she'd screamed a little when she'd swung, but his mom didn't need to know that. Knocked a shuriken right out of the air, scared the guy who threw it so much he just froze. She held onto it the whole time too. "Sounds pretty impressive," Makoto said. "Maybe you should bring that up with her and Obito. He's always had a knack for kenjutsu. If she's interested, he'd be an excellent teacher." "Not a bad idea," Sasuke said, leaning forward. "It would be nice to have someone with blade skills on the team. I don't think either of us are very inclined towards it." "Well, that seems like a good place to start," Kushina said. "Keep it in mind, huh?" She rose off the couch. "Anyone want a snack?" Sitting without company in a bustling restaurant, Obito Uchiha wondered, not for the first time, why for the last 7 and some years he had usually eaten alone. It wasn't because Obito didn't enjoy spending time with people or having meals with them. Sometimes he thought it might just be a bad habit he'd fallen into. Even after Kakashi had died, he'd still done his best to stay connected with people. His newly evolved Sharingan had made him an object of interest with his clan, and his sensei had been careful to make sure he didn't grow apart from his comrades. It was a danger for anyone who'd lost teammates, and Obito had avoided it handily. After all, avoiding things was his speciality. Yet, after Itachi had left the village, Obito's life had grown quieter and quieter. He'd been less welcome with his family, and his teacher and teammate had grown busier and busier. He had friends, or at least he thought he did, but he'd started taking so many missions that he'd rarely seen them. Maybe that was why Minato had stuck him with his son, and Sasuke, and Sakura, Obito thought, to get him to slow down. It was a strange feeling, but he didn't mind having a team to train at all. It helped that he'd known 2 of them rather well right off the bat, even though that had just made him feel guilty about Sakura. His food arrived. He'd decided on a Gyudon. Obito had always preferred simple and savory food, stuff he could make on his own if he needed to. Beef, rice, veggies, maybe a bit of soy sauce. That was all he needed to be content. He thanked the waiter, and the man gave him an uncomfortable smile before going to help another booth. Sakura, he thought, picking up a set of chopsticks and mixing together the beef bowl until all of its carefully placed layers were helplessly inseparable from one another. He didn't get why this restaurant did that. Who wanted to eat the beef, then the veggies, then the rice? They were way better mixed together, right? Maybe it was just a presentation thing. His female student had surprised him. Obito had been watching her carefully on their first C rank together. He'd already been confident that Naruto and Sasuke would be able to handle whatever came their way. They had the competence and the mentality. He'd been right and wrong about that, turned out. Even if Sasuke was smart for his age and knew plenty of Uchiha techniques, he still had the judgment of a teenager. Obito's heart had almost stopped when he'd jumped down to intervene with his fight against Haiden, and the rest of the team had followed him. Obito wished he could just call them stupid, but he wasn't under any illusions. Haiden might have killed him if not for their help. He'd been steadily cutting the man to shreds, but he'd been almost exhausted by the end of the fight. Just a bit of bad luck, some sloppy footwork, and that scythe might have punched a hole in his heart or his head instead of his arm. Sakura had been the one to jump into that pit. Sasuke had gone first, but he hadn't been able to actually reach the heart. Sakura, the one who he'd been worried would crumble under pressure, had gone in without hesitation. She'd endured all that blood and seized Haiden's heart. That was good, he thought. That meant the girl who didn't know why she wanted to be a ninja was definitely prepared to be one. Still, Obito wished that she hadn't had to prove that to him at all. It was just Mind if we sit down? Staring at his beef with his grip around the chopsticks so tight they were in danger of snapping, Abito didn't notice two people approaching his booth until they were right on top of him. He jerked to the side on reflex, looking over to the familiar voice. Minato Namikaze watched him with a faint smile, the same kind he wore every time Abito did something he found amusing. He wasn't wearing his Hokage outfit, just plain black pants and a white shirt. Somehow, he made it look pretty official. You all right, Abito? Behind their sensei, Rin Noira gave him a little wave, and Abito blinked. She was still wearing her hospital uniform. She must have come straight from work. Abito blinked again. Yeah, no problem. The Hokage and Rin slipped into the booth opposite them, and the waiter hurried back to take their order. Water, Minato said. Rin asked for the same, and some sake, and the man was gone again. So the fourth Hokage said, I've heard from a couple people now that you guys had an interesting mission. Abito laughed. Yeah, something like that. He turned the piece of beef he had in his chopsticks over. You mind if I? Go for it, Rin said, and Abito took a couple grateful bites, using the quiet it bought him to gather his thoughts. Yeah, he repeated, setting his chopsticks down in the bowl. Still plenty of food left, but he could find time to eat it through the conversation. Sorry, Sensei. We ended up in a rough situation. It happens, Minato said with a shrug. I'm sure Naruto was able to handle it. He looked Abito up and down. The fourth had always had a peculiar way of analyzing people, Abito thought, that made it obvious you were being appraised without being judged or threatened. You seem all right. I was fine, besides a little chakra exhaustion, Abito said, taking another bite. He raised up his arm, twisting it to and fro for emphasis. I caught his scythe in my arm once, but it was a clean wound. He looked at Rin with a little smile. Those medical jutsu you've shown me took care of it without much issue. Can't even feel it now. Rin raised an eyebrow. A scythe? She asked, and Abito nodded. Yeah. What did you tell her, Sensei? He asked, and Minato shook his head. Rin came here on her own, he said. We just happened to run into each other. I guess we both wanted to see how you were doing. I had one of your students today, Rin continued. Abito cocked his head. What do you mean? You sent her in, remember? Rin grinned. Right, Sakura. He'd asked her to check in with the hospital about the cut on her arm. It had slipped his mind for a moment. Sakura, he asked. Was she all right? Fine, Rin said. So far as we could tell, anyway. I decided to take her, even if it was just a checkup. She gave him a mischievous smile, and Abito smiled back uncertainly. I got the impression she already knew me. Really? Abito asked. I haven't talked about you much, Dash. Rin's smile fell away, and Abito realized he was a moron. She started speaking again before he could say anything else. Anyway, she said, and Abito couldn't help but notice that Minato was resisting the urge to laugh. She told me that you and Sasuke had seen something weird with your Sharingan, but so far as I could tell the wound was clean. She does have a little foreign chakra in her though, a spot on her heart. Abito rocked back, and Rin held her hands up in a placating gesture. Nothing to worry about, she said with emphasis, and Abito relaxed, marginally. It's not affecting her system, and it's not circulating. It's like a clot, almost. If it were blood, that'd be a problem, but it's just a bit of natural energy and chakra mixed up in a weird way that refuses to move on. She laughed, a melodic sound that Abito loved. If she tried unlocking the eighth gate, she might have some complications. But if she did that, she'd be dead anyway, so. Right, Abito said. Well, that's a relief. Swimming through all that blood was bad enough. If it gave her trouble, He didn't know how to finish that sentence. What would he do? Feel bad. He already felt bad for letting his team get put in danger. The waiter arrived with drinks, and Minato took a sip of his water. Abito, he said, you're pouting. Abito straightened up self-consciously. He'd always been self-conscious of how round his face was for an Uchiha. He thought it made even a marginally unhappy expression look like a pout, which was why he tried smiling so much. Sorry, he said, frustration leaking through. Minato and Rin watched him curiously. I'm just sore, Rin asked, and Abito shook his head. She reached for her sake. I feel stupid, he admitted. I didn't want to put any of them through something like that. I picked a C rank that I thought would be simple and easy, To ease them in. I just wanted. He searched for a better word and was unable to find it. I just wanted to keep them safe, I guess. You did, Rin said. Nothing to worry about there. Obito frowned. I wasn't good enough. Even just 2 months of staying in the village with them put me out of practice. And I let them talk me into too much. Naruto wanted to go ahead, and I let him. I just made him stay behind me. If I'd been thinking straight, I would have just kept them in the Kamui. I should have just sucked them up the moment things started getting weird. He dropped his head. I told you, Sensei. I don't know if I was ready for a team. I let them down. The fourth Hokage watched him for a moment, and Obito stared into his bowl of half-eaten beef, his gut churning. Obito, I gave you my son, you know, Minato finally said. I wouldn't have done that if I didn't think you could train him and keep him safe. Obito looked up, and the Hokage crossed his arms. Your Sharingan is amazing enough that your main issue has always been self-confidence, he said, and Obito felt his face go red. It was a little brutal to say it so straightforwardly, wasn't it? Shinobi never stop learning, and that team is another lesson for you. You're definitely worthy of being their teacher. Minato dash, he started to say, and his teacher raised one hand. Obito stopped. That was a Hokage motion, not a Minato one. Sensei always said that a shinobi is one who endures, Minato said, looking Obito dead in the eyes. He was one of the few people who did that. Even other Leaf Ninja usually didn't look into Obito's Sharingan. He'd heard it around a couple times that it was considered bad luck. Obito wondered where Jiraiya was now. He'd trained under the Toad Sage himself for a little over a year, sometime after Minato had officially been appointed as Hokage, and sometimes he found himself missing the melodramatic giant of a man. And he was definitely right about that. Minato leaned forward, setting his elbows on the table and clasping his hands. But we all know, he said gently, that being a shinobi is more than just enduring. A shinobi is also one who sacrifices. I know it. Obito couldn't help but hear those last words in the echo of his teacher's own. No one had to sacrifice anything this time, Obito, Minato said with a smile. Just their hygiene, I guess, if what I heard about what Sasuke and Sakura did is true. You can try to keep your team as safe as you want, but if you don't succeed, that's not a failure on your part. He understood what he was talking about, Obito knew. Minato was the one here who had actually lost one of his students. If they have to sacrifice, Minato said, then all that's happened is they've learned what being a shinobi is. You don't have to worry about keeping them safe from that. I'd really prefer to, Obito muttered, feeling like he'd lost an argument no one had been having. Rin laughed. That's nice of you, Obito, she said with a smile. You're always too nice for your own good. Don't worry about those kids. They'll be fine. Just focus on training them. She winked. If you make it so they can protect themselves instead of you having to keep an eye for them, that'll be a lot easier on you, right? Obito sighed. You always were the smart one, huh? Rin's smile grew a little sadder. Well, someone had to be after Kakashi was gone, she said. I didn't see you stepping up. Rude. Obito grinned, taking another bite of his beef. A thought occurred to him. Do you guys want to stay for dinner? Or do you have somewhere to be? I could eat, Rin said, and Minato nodded as well. Cool, Obito smiled. It would be nice to not eat alone again for a change. Cool. It was another month before Team 7 took another C rank. Once more, they left the village, this time in search of a missing courtier. A servant of the daimyo's court had gone missing, and the Land of Fire's government had been concerned he was kidnapped. This time, the mission held no surprises. The courtier, a portly man named Nobu, was located in short order in a small town near the southern border of the country, unbelievably drunk and raging at a dead-end job that he was worried he would be trapped in for the rest of his life. Obito had been sympathetic until the man had vomited on him. After that, he'd been immediately delivered to the capital. Team 7 returned to Konoha, and Sakura was ecstatic to share a collective sigh of relief with her teammates. When they got back to the village, the leaves were just beginning to turn. Autumn was coming to the village hidden in the leaves, bathing their home in a beautiful flurry of red, orange, and yellow. They'd all thought, in their own quiet way, that perhaps every mission would be like their first one. But it wasn't to be. Most C-rank missions, just like D ranks, which increasingly involved cleaning up the millions and millions of leaves that littered the village, were boring and routine. Few of them were even violent. And so, Team 7 fell into a familiar and comfortable pattern. 35 days after Sakura had retrieved Haiden's heart, Naruto snapped his fingers. "Shoot," he said, the noodles in his mouth rendering the word garbled and barely understandable. "I totally forgot." "Something important, Naruto?" Obito looked over, and so did Sakura. They were having lunch together at a ramen place that Naruto loved. Sakura didn't really understand why he liked the food so much, but it definitely wasn't bad. Maybe noodles just weren't her thing. "Kinda," he said with a slurp. "My dad wanted to meet me later. He wanted to see how I was doing with the Rasengan." "How's that going?" Sakura asked. Her teammate had carried water balloons everywhere he went for a long time now, furiously trying to pop them with his chakra. It made her feel a little bad, but after seeing all the trouble Naruto had gone through trying to learn the jutsu, the gap between them had seemed a little less impossible to breach. Even after more than 2 months of trying, Naruto still hadn't managed to burst the balloon. Naruto stuck out his tongue. "Bad," he said. He was grinning through. Sakura was coming to admire that about Naruto. It didn't matter if he was frustrated or not. He always grinned. It didn't seem false to her either. Her teammate was just happy and didn't let things get him down. She hoped he'd always be that way. "What about you?" Sasuke asked, taking a subdued slurp of his ramen, and Sakura turned to him. "How's your Kenjutsu going, Sakura? I haven't seen much of it recently." That was true, to Sakura's regret. Obito had been focusing them all on controlling their chakra with more precision since they'd gotten back from their first mission outside the village. Maybe to help Naruto learn the Rasengan, maybe just to expand their skill set and prepare them for more advanced training. It could be hard to tell with their sensei sometimes. He was friendly, and he frequently joked with them, but he seemed to prefer letting them figure things out on their own, with a little helpful prodding. Teaching them to walk on water had been a prime example of that. Obito had met them by one of the rivers that ran through the wilderness of the village's territory, watching them with a coy grin. "Follow me," he'd said, striding right across the water and then turning to watch them expectantly. It wasn't very far or deep, and so they'd all done as he asked, wading through the water after him and coming out on the other side. "Well done," he'd said, and Naruto had laughed. All they'd done was walk through some water. What was he congratulating them for? Obito had just grinned and walked back to the other side of the bank. "All right," he'd smirked. "Now come back across without getting your knees wet." That had been an interesting day. It had taken all of them a couple hours to figure out how to navigate the river, with its constant current and occasional swells. Sakura, to her astonishment, had been first to manage it. She'd considered asking for help, but hadn't wanted to be the first one to do so. So instead, she tried to look at it as logically as possible. "The reason you sank into water is because you were denser than it," she'd thought. Really simple physics, and for that reason apparently inescapable. So, how could a ninja use chakra to escape that universal rule of density? She couldn't alter her own density. At least, she was pretty sure of that. Wasn't the henge just a physical transformation in a similar manner? But you couldn't alter your density or weight with a henge, only your physical shape. If you turned yourself into a giant shuriken, you'd be as aerodynamic as one, but still just as heavy as yourself. Even if she turned herself into a log or something that would float on water, she'd still sink. So it couldn't be modifying her own density. The epiphany came to Sakura slowly, as she watched Sasuke pace, sending stutters of chakra into his feet and blowing small gaps in the grass of the bank. He must have picked something up with his Sharingan, she'd realized. She couldn't alter her density, or the water's. That meant if water walking was something basic enough that Obito expected them to be able to learn it, it had to be based on a simple principle. All she had to do was use her chakra to provide a buoyant buffer, something that would push her up without actively disrupting the liquid. Like a lifeguard's buoy, but on her feet. Sakura had gone to the bank and started experimentally dipping her foot in, feeling the play of chakra down her leg, and trying to direct it as neatly as possible. Naruto had tried to walk across the river on his hands, his legs waving in the air and his head submerged, and Obito had leapt to him and pushed him over for his trouble, laughing as Naruto had come up soaked and squawking. "Up, down." Sakura had spent 5 minutes just pushing her foot in and out of the water, squinting, and trying to control the exact amount of chakra being ejected from the bottom of her foot. Too much, and it blew a hole in the water like a gust of air. Too little, and her foot slipped right in with a little resistance, as though the water were pushing back. But after 5 minutes, she'd managed to make it so that one foot would settle firmly on the surface, even if she put all of her weight on it. So she'd done the same thing for the other, and then slowly waddled across the river, one foot barely an inch in front of the other the whole way. That had been exciting, even exulting. The way Obito had smiled at her had made her feel unbelievably proud. But Kenjutsu wasn't like that at all. Kenjutsu was frustrating. Even with both her sensei and her father working with her, Sakura felt like she wasn't making progress. Bad, she said, mimicking Naruto, and Sasuke chuckled. It wasn't mean. At least, she didn't think so. He'd always been harder to read. Well, he said with a shrug, I guess you need to spend more time with Obito. Sensei, Obito said with a grin, and Sasuke shot him an insolent look. Obito-sensei, little guy. Of course, Sasuke said with a tiny smirk. And what do you think of my suggestion, sensei? Actually, Obito said, I think I might be too advanced a partner for Sakura. Sakura looked over to him, feeling her stomach sink. Did Obito mean that she wasn't skilled enough to learn? She hadn't thought her sword skills were that bad. She'd bought a practice blade with some of the bounty money she'd earned, and Obito had been teaching her various forms and footwork. Had she been that useless with it? Don't get the wrong idea, he said, catching her look, and Sakura sighed in embarrassment. You've definitely got potential, but I think you might learn a bit quicker with someone else. It's been so long since I studied the basics that I've been practically learning with you. He laughed. It's good when that stuff becomes so second nature you barely remember it anymore. But it makes for a lousy teacher, right? So, he meant it when he said he was too advanced for her. It wasn't an excuse. Sakura looked down into her bowl. That's why, Obito continued. I'm thinking that Sakura should start out learning with someone else. Sakura looked up at him, a little confused. When you've got the basics down, then we can pick back up, and I can teach you some trickier stuff. Someone else? Sasuke asked before Sakura could. Who do you mean? One of Guy's students, Obito said, and Sasuke winced. Oh, Naruto said, almost jumping out of his seat. The green guy? Sakura wasn't sure who he was talking about. Green guy? She asked Obito, and her sensei grinned. Yup, he said. Might guy, Konoha's premier taijutsu specialist, and a very green guy. Obito, Might guy shouted at the top of his lungs when they arrived at the field, before jumping into a leaping kick and driving his foot straight through their sensei's head. Sakura and Naruto stumbled backwards, falling on their backs in shock as the lunatic in green spun and tried to kick Obito in half. The second attack was just as useless as the first. Obito just watched him in amusement, crossing his arms as the kick passed harmlessly through him. Sasuke was much the same. Their teammate just sighed, taking a seat on his own and watching the show. Good to see you too, Guy. Obito grinned, and Sakura watched in shock as Guy attacked one last time, driving a series of punches too fast for her to see through Obito's chest. He really was very green, she thought. Everything he wore was green. It looked like it might be some kind of jumpsuit, with a matching top and bottom. Even his sandals were a dim, grassy color. Guy declared, coming to a stop. As ever, you are elusive, Obito. He smiled. He must have brushed his teeth several times a day, Sakura thought, because they were blindingly white. Your reflexes are superb, as always. Her sensei rolled his eyes. Like I said the other 58 times, Guy, it's automatic. By now if I see you coming, I just turn the Kimui on just in case. Well, that is a wonderful precaution. Guy gave the Uchiha a thumbs up, and Sakura's teacher smiled. But even with your foresight, one day, I will strike you. Looking forward to it, Obito laughed. But I'm not here to spar today. If not to spar, Guy asked with a sly look, then why? He glanced around at Sakura and her teammates, all of whom were still on the ground. Perhaps there is a lesson the Green Beast can teach your students that you cannot, Well, something like that, Obito said, and Guy clashed his fists together in excitement. I knew it, he said. Well, we shall start with 400 push-ups, at least. Your cousin looks a little weedy. Sasuke made a vaguely offended sound, and both Naruto and Sakura snorted. And then dash. Actually, Obito cut his friend off, and Guy frowned. We're just here for Sakura today. Sakura? Guy asked, and Sakura scrambled to her feet and gave a slight bow. Guy looked her up and down. Well, she seems enthusiastic enough. Her taijutsu is fine, Obito said. Right now, she's trying to learn Kenjutsu. Ah, Guy's eyes lit up. You do not seek a master. You seek another student. Precisely, Obito said. He chuckled. Always get right to the heart of it, don't you? I prefer to be direct, Guy declared, before returning his attention to Sakura. Even just being watched by him was intimidating, Sakura thought. The man had so much energy it was like he was going to burst at any moment, and having all of his focus on her made her fill up with nervous jitters. So, you intend to be a swordswoman? He asked, and Sakura was suddenly unsure. I think so, she said, and Guy cocked his head. I didn't have any interest in the academy, but I picked up a sword on our first C rank, and… Guy nodded. That nasty business. He was still bursting with energy, but he grew a little more somber. Sakura could see then that he was more than just a slightly insane martial artist. There was a bit of commiseration in Guy's eyes as he looked at her. What you find interest in while learning and what you find comforting on the battlefield can be very different. If a blade felt good in your hands while you fought, then a blade is what you should learn. He smiled again, his somber aura blown away in an instant. After all, when should you be most comfortable, if not when fighting for your life? Sakura blinked. I guess you're right, she said, and the man's grin grew wider. Come then, he said, gesturing grandly to the west. I will introduce you to my students. I believe among them you will meet someone who will help you find that comfort. Team 7 walked with him. Guy occasionally threw more blows at Obito, all of which passed through him. Their sensei ignored all the attacks, not even pausing when he was speaking. Do you ever think you're actually going to hit him? Naruto asked after about a minute, and Guy grinned at him. Of course, he declared. All shinobi have a weakness. Even your father, young man, as hard as that might be to believe. Oh, Sasuke asked, and what would Obito's be then? His ghostly nature is certainly a challenge, Guy said, stroking his chin, and Obito mimicked the action good-naturedly. But it is a tiring technique, and my endurance outstrips his own. I am not called the Green Beast for nothing. I'm pretty sure you are, actually, Obito said. Didn't you come up with that name? I did, Guy said proudly. But that is because I have the speed, strength, and stamina of a beast. It was the only fitting appellation. He quirked an eyebrow. And perhaps you are simply jealous that you have not come up with an equally catchy name. Mangekyo no Obito, Of course not, Obito declared, and Guy laughed. Sakura grinned. Her sensei was sweating. I recall all your failed attempts as surely as you do not, Obito, Guy said, and Team 7 found itself leaning in. Obito the Phantom. Obito the Killer Ghost. Obito of the Bloody Eye. Obito dash. Hey, Obito interrupted, just as Naruto began to break down laughing. That's your team over there, right? Sakura looked where Obito was looking and found 3 teenagers watching them approach from the trees. They were all a little older and taller than her and her team. There were 2 boys and 1 girl, the same composition as most of the teams the academy put out. One of the boys looked like a miniature version of Guy, to Sakura's surprise. They didn't have similar faces, but they had identical outfits and haircuts. The other was unmistakably a Hyuga, his milky eyes watching them approach without any obvious emotion. He had long, flowing black hair, and his hands were covered in bandages. The last, the girl, was a couple inches taller than her companions, and wore a simple white vest. Her hair was in a bun, and a large scroll, as big around as her, was strapped to her back. The training ground they stood in was torn to pieces, small craters punched in the ground everywhere and shuriken, kunai, and other weapons littering the whole place. A target post had been torn in half, the bottom 3 feet of it sticking dismally out of the ground. Ah, sensei, the boy who looked like Guy shouted. You have returned with company. Indeed, Lee, Guy shouted back. This is Mangekyo no Obito. There wasn't a lick of hesitation. Lee charged straight at Obito and tried to tackle him, soaring right through his chest. Sakura's sensei sighed. "So, now you've got a little doppelganger?" he asked, sounding weary, and Sakura resisted the urge to laugh. "He wasn't like this when you started out." "I did not see Gai-sensei's wisdom, starting out," Lee said as he finished rolling to his feet, turning to face Obito. "But he was absolutely correct. If you can strike a ghost, you can strike anything." He was even louder than his master. Sakura finally broke down with a laugh, and Lee glanced at her. To her astonishment, he blushed. Had a boy ever blushed at her? Sakura froze, totally unsure of how to react, but Obito saved her from having to worry about it. "I'm not a ghost," he said glumly. "Why don't you introduce us to your teammates?" "Of course," Lee said, as both his companions approached. "This is Niji," he said, pointing to the Hyuga, "a genius in the gentle fist, who I will no doubt surpass." Niji laughed. It sounded a little mean, Sakura thought, but his face seemed nice enough. "Not anytime soon," he said, and Lee huffed. He looked them over. "So, Sasuke Uchiha and Naruto Namikaze," he said, his voice a little low, and Sakura's teammates straightened up at the attention. "Your sensei is Mangekyo no Obito, is he?" "Seems that way," Naruto said with a frown, and Sakura watched from the side, wondering why Niji had focused solely on her teammates and completely ignored her. "That's good," Niji said. "It would be a shame to defeat you if you had a substandard teacher. People would consider it an excuse." Sasuke stepped forward, an invisible charge passing between him and the Hyuga, and Sakura blinked, wondering what was happening. "What do you mean?" she asked, and Niji stared at her. "I don't know you," he said, his voice curious, and Sakura blinked again. "I'm Sakura Haruno," she said, extending her hand, and after a moment Niji took it in a firm handshake. "It's nice to meet you, Sakura Haruno," he said, inclining his head slightly. "I have no interest in defeating you." "What a strange guy." "Well, that's fine," Sakura said, trying to dispel the tension. "I've got no interest in being defeated by you, so I guess we're on the same level." Niji laughed. "Indeed." He released her hand. To Sakura's relief, the nascent tension was gone. "Ah," Lee said, some of his thunder stolen by his teammates' words. "And this is Tenten." The tall girl stepped forward with a smile. "Nice to meet you all," she said with a wave, and Sakura smiled back. "What brings you to our little corner of the woods?" "Tenten," Guy shouted, and the girl jumped. Sakura here plucked a sword from the hands of an enemy, and it sung to her. "Up," Sakura said, looking over to the man. Obito was facepalming behind him. "I wouldn't quite put it that way, Master Guy." "Ah." Guy stepped back. "My apologies. How would you put it?" Sakura's eyes went wide, and she felt her face go red. "Aya dash." "She picked it up," Naruto said suddenly, and whacked a shuriken right out of the air. Tintin looked surprised, nodding slowly, and Naruto glanced at Sakura. "She was good with it, and she'd been trying to get better," he said, and now Sakura was the one blushing. "I bet she could be real good, with someone to practice with." "Oh," Tintin said with an understanding tone. "You think she'd be a good training partner, Sensei?" "A wonderful one," Guy declared. "She is young and persistent. I believe you, and she would do well to learn from one another, Tintin." He grinned. "Not to mention, it would force Obito to spend more time around me. Eventually, he will slip up." Obito shook his head, and Sasuke patted him on the shoulder with mock compassion. Tintin laughed. "Well, I suppose it couldn't hurt," she said, and Sakura smiled at her tone. "Besides, you guys are all obsessed with your fists anyway. It would be nice to have some practice with someone else who appreciates a sword." She looked at Sakura. "Do you appreciate a sword?" "I don't know," Sakura said with a shrug. She gave Naruto an appreciative look, and the blonde grinned and scratched the back of his head. "But I want to find out." "Good enough for me," Tintin declared. "Let's get started." 74 days after her first C rank, Sakura knocked Tintin's sword out of her hands. They both watched it go, equally startled, as it spun off into the air and buried itself several inches into the dirt. Tintin looked down at her, and Sakura looked back, very aware, as always, of the height difference between them. Her sword, one she'd borrowed from her training partner, was still in her hand, Standing there holding a naked blade with Tintin disarmed in front of her, Sakura didn't know what to do. The older girl smiled. Nice one. She laughed, and the tension of the moment dissolved without ceremony. It was a sunny day, approaching the afternoon, and the two of them were alone in one of Konoha's hundreds of training grounds. She turned, walking after the sword, and drew it out of the earth. I didn't see that coming. You weren't gripping the sword, Sakura said. One of the first things that Tintin had taught her beyond the basics of improving her footwork and form was that it was critical for a shinobi to always keep hold of their weapon with chakra. Otherwise, a strong blow would easily tear the weapon out of their hands. The only reason she wouldn't have been doing that. Well, I'm still going a little easy on you, Tintin said with a grin, flourishing her blade. But now that you've disarmed me, you've proved that's not necessary anymore. She sheathed it behind her back, placing it back in the ceiling scrolls she carried everywhere with her. Here, gimme it back. We're done for now. Sakura gingerly returned the sword, keeping the blade facing away from Tintin. What do you mean? I mean, you're a natural, Tintin said, and Sakura blushed. Well, maybe natural is the wrong word, 'cause you didn't pick it up right away. She turned, waving for Sakura to follow her. They walked together to the other side of the field, towards the target posts opposite the dirt pit they'd been practicing in. I was frustrated getting started, Sakura admitted, and Tintin chuckled. Yeah, that was obvious, she said, and Sakura laughed as well. But it's only been a month and you've already gotten to the point where I'm going to have to start using chakra for our spars. She glanced down at her. That's impressive. I get the feeling that you could have done whatever you put your mind to. You're smart enough, and you put the work in. Well, Sakura looked south, over to the back of the Hokage monument. I don't know if I would have taken things this seriously. Yeah, Tintin grinned. We're kinda alike, you know? What? Sakura asked, and her sparring partner shrugged. Tintin was older than her, and, though Sakura wouldn't admit this out loud for fear of being teased, she thought she was much cooler as well. She'd never considered a similarity between the two of them besides their kenjutsu. We both ended up on interesting teams, and it pushed us in interesting directions. They came to a stop about 30 meters from the target posts, and Tintin set down her scroll. They both pushed us. I don't know about that, Sakura said quietly. I don't mean like forced. Tintin removed several dozen shuriken from the scroll, laying them out in neat rows. I mean that being near that made us want to be better, so we wouldn't fall behind. She looked back at Sakura. You're on a team with an Uchiha prodigy and the Hokage's son. You must have been worried about that. She was still worried about that. Sakura just nodded. I ended up with Niji and Lee, Tintin continued. Niji might be from the branch house, but he's a prodigy just like Sasuke. Maybe even better. She laughed. And Lee might be complete garbage at ninjutsu and jinjutsu, but he took that and made his taijutsu better than it has any right to be. He's already way beyond the average chunin there. With those guys on either side of me, I felt like I needed something of my own. She threw 7 shuriken and scored 7 direct hits on the various targets scattered across the posts, bullseyeing each one without apparent effort. Sakura smiled. So you made it so you'd never miss, she said, and Tintin nodded. I made it so I'd never miss, she said, and punctuated the point with another 10 shuriken and another 10 bullseyes. She wasn't kidding, Sakura thought. She and Tintin had been training their kenjutsu together for several weeks now, and whenever they finished, Tintin would practice her aim. In all that time, Sakura had never once seen her miss. Tintin threw another brace of shuriken, and 2 of them angled into each other, deflecting off at wild angles to score bullseyes on the sides of the posts. What do you mean by branch house? Sakura asked. She hadn't heard the term before. Tintin's eyes narrowed. The Hyuga aren't like the other clans, she said, hurling yet more shuriken, along with a couple kunai. Hit, hit, hit. Sakura didn't know how she managed it. There's the main family and the branch family. I don't know what determines it, but if you're branch family like Niji, you're basically a servant to the main family. She started walking forward to retrieve her tools, and Sakura followed, interested in hearing more. Niji's father is the twin brother of the head of the clan right now, but he's still branch. Maybe he was born second or something. That means Niji is too. The head of the Hyuga? Sakura asked. Wouldn't that be Hinata's father? She hadn't seen any of her classmates, Hinata included, in several weeks, and sometimes she found herself missing them. Sakura hadn't been incredibly close to anyone in her class, even Ino or Hinata, but it had been nice to be part of the group regardless. Yeah, Tintin nodded. She's Niji's closest cousin. You know, twin dads. She screwed up her face. That must be kinda weird. They spar a lot. He always wins. She laughed. He doesn't seem to mind. He doesn't hate her or the main branch or anything like that, but he definitely likes beating them. I guess to him fighting Hinata is like fighting the whole concept of the clan. Hmm. They fell into a comfortable silence, and Sakura picked up several kunai of her own. Hitting a bullseye from 100 feet away wasn't impossible for her, but there was no way she could match Tintin there. Her first knife overshot and buried itself high on the post. The second didn't have enough power and fell short by a foot. She huffed, and Tintin giggled. I don't know how you do it, she said, and Tintin shrugged. You'd get it with time. I've been doing this for more than a year now, she said, proving the point with another perfectly thrown knife. Like I said, you're smart enough to figure out just about anything, I think. She looked back, the sun shining in her eyes and making her squint. Isn't that why you became a shinobi? Sakura felt a chill run down her back, and Tintin quirked her head. She'd shown something, Sakura realized, in her eyes or her body language. What? Tintin asked, and Sakura frowned. Why did you? She asked, and Tintin blinked. Become a shinobi, I mean. Tintin looked away from the blinding sun and from Sakura. Well, I don't have a family. There wasn't anyone pushing for me to become a ninja, though I guess a lot of orphans become ninja because it's the best option for them. But when I was young, I heard stories about the Sannin and Tsunade. She gave a sheepish smile. I guess that inspired me. The Sannin. Sakura only knew the basics. 3 incredibly famous shinobi from the Leaf who'd been instrumental in the Second War. Jiraiya, Orochimaru, and Tsunade. She had no idea where any of them were now. Tsunade invented the medical division, Tintin said, and Sakura started. She hadn't known that. And she was the strongest woman alive, supposedly. So I wanted to be a medic, and I wanted to be strong. She chuckled. But when I ended up with Gai-sensei, it became obvious really quickly that I didn't have the control or patience to be a medic. I kept killing everything I was given to practice on, fish and stuff. I couldn't even separate coffee from cream without blowing the cup up. I guess I have violent chakra. Like the balloon, Sakura thought. Naruto had finally managed to pop the water balloon just 2 weeks before, circulating his chakra through the water so violently that the balloon burst. He'd been exuberant until he'd come back the next day. His father had given him a rubber ball about the size of his hand upon receiving the news, apparently. Now, he had to break an even harder material without help from the water. Sakura wondered what kind of jutsu could possibly require such precise and directed chakra control, without even an elemental affinity. She snapped back to the present as Tintin continued. I was heartbroken at first, but Gai-sensei told me that Tsunade probably hadn't set out to become a great medic from the start. She'd just ended up where she was best. She plucked the last of the shuriken from the post, sealing it back into her scroll. So, I started messing around with ninja tools, and with Fuinjutsu, and I ended up with this. And now, I'm going to follow it as far as it'll take me. In that way, I think I'm still following the person who inspired me. So, Tintin had become a shinobi because someone had inspired her. That made sense to Sakura. Plenty of people did things for that reason. Why'd you ask anyway? Tintin said, and Sakura sighed. I didn't have anything like that, she admitted. Obito-sensei asked me, the first day, why I'd become a shinobi. And I didn't know. I didn't have an answer. I just ended up as one. Well, that's probably what happens to most people, Tintin said, and Sakura blinked, her internal condemnation drying up under Tintin's frankness. It's a hidden village, after all. If you don't know what to do, you become a ninja. Both your parents are, right? Sakura nodded, and Tintin smiled. You looked worried. Relax. If you grew up with 2 ninja as your only example, what else could you have done? Everyone ends up where they are because of who's around them, not because they're born with a purpose or something. Have you been worried about that this whole time? A little, Sakura admitted, suddenly feeling silly. It's all right, Tintin said, smacking her shoulder. She did that a lot. The older girl was more physical than anyone else Sakura had met. You're figuring it out now, right? That's all you can do sometimes. Sakura, at that moment, felt a deep and abiding appreciation for the older girl. Thanks, she said haltingly. Tintin, we're friends, right? Tintin gave her a puzzled look. We've been hanging out for a month and clashing swords almost every day. Did you think we weren't friends? Sorry, Sakura said, mortified. I just dash. Forget it. Tintin smiled. Grab another sword. We still have some sunlight. She drew her own weapon, a short glaive, and paced back from Sakura, putting about 20 feet between them. This time, you're getting disarmed. I guarantee it. Grateful and more than a little relieved, Sakura reached for the scroll, drew a chikudo out, and leapt back into a ready position as the sun continued to set behind her. When the last of the leaves fell, over 100 days after their first C rank, Naruto finished the Rasengan. Sakura. Sakura jerked and looked to her left, out her bedroom window. She found Naruto there, staring at her with an enormous grin plastered on his face. Only her teammate's head was visible, peeking around the side of the windowsill. He was standing on the side of her apartment. Naruto. She set down the book she'd been reading on her bed, standing up and walking over to the window. She'd left it open to enjoy some of the cool winter air. Konoha didn't get very cold, even in December, though it had snowed once in her memory. What are you doing? I figured it out, he declared proudly, and Sakura heard someone start to climb the stairs to her room below. Her mother was the only one home right now, so it was certainly her. I got it. Got what? She asked. You don't mean dash. The Rasengan. Sakura was taken aback. It had only been 10 days before that Naruto had managed to burst the rubber ball with his chakra and move on to what he had been told was the final step. He'd been given an empty balloon and told to form his chakra within it without popping it, the complete reversal of the previous exercises. Had he really figured it out that quickly? Congratulations, she said after a moment of hesitation, and Naruto's smile grew wider. Come on, he said, and the footsteps reached the top of the stairs. I'm gonna grab Sasuke and show my dad. Do you want to come with? She blinked. Naruto had come to her first, instead of his parents or Sasuke. Why? She must have just been closest, Sakura thought. That's what made the most sense. Sakura. Her mother pushed open the door behind her, and Sakura half-turned, looking over her shoulder. Everything all right, dash? She spotted Naruto over her shoulder. Oh, she exclaimed. Naruto, what are you doing out there? The blonde looked sheepish. It was the quickest way up, he said, and Sakura's mother laughed. Well, don't scuff the wall, all right? You'll be the one paying for it. She was wearing a nice necklace, Sakura noticed, one of the things she'd bought with the bounty money from Haiden. Sakura had never really understood jewelry, but she had to admit the necklace with its silver chain and sapphire stone was really quite pretty. What did you come for? Sakura's family had only met Naruto a couple times, but they'd always hit it off. Her teammate was infectious in his enthusiasm and good cheer, and the fact he was the Hokage's son probably helped. Naruto just shrugged in response to Mabuki's question. Just wanted to show Sakura something, he said. I've got a new jutsu. Well, that certainly sounds interesting, Sakura's mother said, glancing at her and wiggling her eyebrows. Sakura stared back without comprehension, and her mother laughed. Go on then. Just close the window behind you, would you? Her mother closed the door, and when Sakura hopped out the window, sticking herself to the wall alongside Naruto, she gently closed the window. They made their way to the Uchiha compound, chattering about trivialities along the way. Konoha in the winter was always an interesting sight. The multitude of forests that peppered the village were bereft of their leaves, robbing their home of much of its color and vitality, and thick clouds frequently hung low over the village. Its citizens countered the gloominess by hanging more colorful tapestries in the streets and planting vibrant winter fruits and trees on the rooftops, but there was still more gray than green. The only exception were the grand trees planted by the first Hokage, dozens of meters tall and furnished with leaves throughout the year. No matter the weather or circumstances, the founding trees of Konoha would never wither. Sakura had always wondered why the Uchiha's home was on the outskirts of the village, well away from any other residential districts. They'd been one of the founding clans, but they were more isolated than any of them. Had that been their decision or someone else's? The compound had a couple different entrances, but the largest was the southward facing, and that was the one Naruto and Sakura approached from. There was a young boy sitting outside it, maybe 4 or 5 years old, whittling something into a tree, and he watched them enter with a solemn expression. The Uchiha built differently from the rest of Konoha. They had wide, cobbled streets, and their homes were more concrete than wood. Naruto seemed to know the way, and so Sakura followed him. She'd never seen Sasuke's home before. They passed several Uchiha, all of whom glanced at them, but no stopped to speak with them. In a little more than a minute, they came to a squat and wide house, only 1 story tall, but still larger than Sakura's own home. Naruto knocked on the door, and then let himself inside. "Sasuke," he called, and in response a woman stuck her head through a doorframe at the end of the hall. Sakura had only met Mikoto Uchiha twice in all her time with her team, and just like last time, she couldn't take her eyes off the burns on the woman's otherwise beautiful face. "Naruto?" the woman asked. "He's out back." She shifted her gaze to Sakura, her scars crinkling. "Hello, Sakura. What's this about?" Naruto figured out the Rasengan, Sakura said self-consciously, and Mikoto clicked her tongue in surprise. He wanted Sasuke to be there when he shows his father. Well, who can blame him? That's quite the achievement. Mikoto gestured over her shoulder. "Out back, like I said. Congratulations, Naruto." "Thanks." Naruto bolted past her, while Sakura did her best to give Sasuke's mother a respectable distance as she made her way down the hallway. Mikoto watched her go as she did, and Sakura slowed, wondering if she'd done something wrong. "Obito tells me your Kenjutsu has improved," Mikoto said, and Sakura blinked, turning to look at the woman directly. She was watching Sakura with something she couldn't identify. "I'm a swordswoman myself. We should meet sometime." "I." Sakura felt a gear in her head catch. There was a cold sweat on the back of her neck. Mikoto's gaze, even without her Sharingan active, was intense. "Pardon me, ma'am." "Naruto and Sasuke already know this," Sasuke's mother said with a frown. "But you are on a team, more than any other, that may have to face a Sharingan one day. It would benefit you to learn how to fight it." "I don't understand," Sakura admitted. Mikoto shook her head, the intensity vanishing. "Don't worry about it, for now," she said with a faint smile. "Just consider my offer, if you would." "Of course," Sakura said, trying to understand what had just happened. "Of course I will. I promise." Mikoto shooed her away with a grin, and Sakura left, stepping into the backyard to find Sasuke and Naruto waiting for her. Her Uchiha teammate had worked up a sweat. There was a tree covered in small burns and ninja tools behind him. "What happened?" Naruto asked, and Sakura shook her head. "Nothing," she said, wondering if that was true. "Sorry I took a second." "All right," Sasuke said. "Let's go then." He grinned at Naruto. "I'd like to see this jutsu, if you've really figured it out." They left the compound together, making their way to the Hokage's office. It was one of the tallest and most central buildings in Konoha, visible from any rooftop in the village, and Sakura had never been inside before. They made their way through one of the side doors, Naruto nodding at a watching Chunin, and climbed a twisting staircase that ran through the whole building. 7 floors up, and they came to a hall, and Naruto confidently stepped down it, quietly whistling a tune to himself. There was an ANBU outside the office, guarding the heavy double doors, and he watched them approach with a mask marked with a minimalistic hawk. When Naruto reached for the door, he shook his head. "Meeting," he said, and Naruto frowned. "Give him a minute, kid." Naruto stuck his tongue out, to Sakura's shock. "It'll only be a minute," he said, and the ANBU shifted. Sakura couldn't believe that her teammate was willing to talk back to a senior ninja like that. Even if he was the Hokage's son, that was rude, right? She glanced at Sasuke. He wasn't showing an emotion of any kind. It was impossible to know if he felt the same way. But the ANBU made no move to stop them when Naruto pushed the door open, so Sakura didn't say anything. "Sensei's old students are always causing trouble," the Hokage said as they entered, looking up from his desk as they entered. There were 5 other people in the room with him. Sakura only recognized 2 of them. The third Hokage, who had retired before she was born but was still a man with a very imposing presence, and Kushina Uzumaki, Naruto's mother. The other three were a man and a woman with gray hair and severe expressions, and another middle-aged man with spiky black hair and deep frown lines. 2 scars ran from above and below his left eye to the side of his face, ending near his ears. Of all the adults in the room, he was the one who watched them with the most intensity. The Hokage made eye contact with his son, and Sakura felt a flash of guilt. They shouldn't be here right now. They'd intruded on something important. All the adults in the room were looking at them now, all curiously, some with confusion, and the Hokage finished his thought as he pinned his son with his brilliant blue eyes. Until they cause an actual issue, we're inviting them, he declared, and the room relaxed. We'll revisit the issue in May. He straightened up. Naruto, something wrong. Who let you in? Kushina demanded, and Naruto shrugged. We've talked about this before, Naruto. You can't just walk into your father's office whenever you want. Hawk let me in, Naruto said with a grin. How could he be so confident, with his family, a previous Kage, and other important shinobi staring at him? Sakura really couldn't understand him sometimes. I got it. You got it, the Hokage asked, and his son nodded. He smiled faintly. Sakura couldn't remember ever seeing the Hokage smile before. The few times she'd seen him, he'd always been so serious and solemn. But he had a smile like Naruto's, one that was bright and guileless. Well, it took longer than Obito thought it would, but that's still good to hear. Let's see it then. Naruto stepped forward, and Sakura and Sasuke stayed back, watching him. He set himself in a concentrated stance, his feet widely planted and his posture completely upright, and held one hand out before him, the other settling into a claw over it. As Sakura watched intently, he started channeling chakra to his hand. A lot, enough for it to be visible, a faint blue glow growing in his hand. The glow grew, becoming a small sphere of violently rotating chakra. It wobbled, seemingly about to come apart, and Naruto's other hand came down, helping spin the chakra and directing it with small, quick motions, keeping its form. Just several seconds later, he drew his hand back with a prideful grin. There, sitting and keening in his hand, was a small ball of bright, dangerous chakra, spinning in place. Just looking at it, Sakura could tell that it was dangerous. She had no idea what would happen if it hit something. But that much chakra spinning so rapidly, it almost looked like it wasn't moving would probably blow a hole through a stone wall with ease. Naruto held the jutsu in his hand for 10 seconds, luxuriating in the attention being paid to him, and then closed his fingers. The Rasengan vanished, and the sound and light with it. The Hokage smiled. Nicely done. Across from him, the third Hokage grinned. Very good, Naruto, the older man said, and Sakura's teammate beamed. The third had a comforting voice. He'd occasionally spoken at the academy, and Sakura had always been compelled to listen. In a way, he was a grandfather to the entire village. To acquire an A-rank jutsu at your age is no easy task. He glanced at both Sasuke and Sakura. I hope you intend to share it. He better, Kushina huffed, before she smiled. Good job. Now get out of here, before I throw you out. Got it. Naruto gave her a thumbs up and beat a hasty retreat, and Sakura and Sasuke followed, not saying a word. They passed Hawk in the corridor, and the ninja inclined his head. Naruto held his hand out for a high five, and the ANBU stared at him, leaving him hanging. Sakura's teammate just laughed. Yeah, that's fair, he said, and they made their way down the corridor, away from the office. That's an interesting technique, Sasuke said when they were nearly to the staircase. Sakura realized his Sharingan was winding away. It's nothing but chakra control, huh? Pretty much, Naruto said. That's what all the lessons were about, putting out enough to pop the ball, but then controlling it enough that it wouldn't damage anything. He scratched his cheek, and Sakura's eyes were drawn to the whisker-like scars there. So far as she could tell, her teammate had been born with them. She'd never asked where they'd come from. I guess if I put out too much, but didn't control it, it would tear up my hand or something. That'd be nasty. It's pretty amazing, Naruto, Sakura agreed. She frowned. I wondered what they were talking about. What do you mean? Naruto asked, and Sasuke nodded slowly. You didn't hear? He asked, and Naruto made a helpless gesture that made Sakura laugh. Your father said something about Sensei's old students. Do you have any idea what that meant? Nah, Naruto said, putting his hands behind his head in a gesture of an extravagant lack of care. No clue. I'll ask him about it if you want me to. Could you? Sakura asked, and Naruto glanced at her with a curious expression. I didn't know the fourth had any teammates. It would be interesting to learn about them. Naruto made a surprised face, and Sakura realized he hadn't been looking at it that way. Yeah, he said. That could be interesting. I'll see about that when he's not in a meeting. He grinned. And grumpy. He turned, taking the first step down the staircase. So, do you guys want ice cream or something? I could use a snack. That, Sakura thought, sounded pretty nice. She and Sasuke followed him out into the cool winter air, and by the time they reached the end of the street, immersed in conversation and speculation about the Rasengan, Sakura had forgotten all about her question. Obito leaned back in his chair, watching his teammate closely. Rin quirked her head, a faint smile on her lips. He'd always liked that expression, but right now he couldn't enjoy it like normal. Something in his gut was churning. The Chunin exam, huh? He said, and Rin rolled her eyes. It's every 6 months, she said. Well, usually. You can't really be surprised. Obito leaned forward, picking up his water. Rin had barged into his apartment and helped herself to his fridge, and now they were seated in his living room. When was the last time they'd been here together, he wondered. Months ago, maybe a year. Why was that? I'm not surprised it's here, Obito clarified. I'm surprised you think my team's ready. They've already been on an S-ish ranked mission, Rin said with a laugh. I've been watching you guys, you know. Obito almost choked on his water. Rin had been watching them? What exactly did she mean by that? Naruto's already figured out the Rasengan, and Sasuke's well on his way, in addition to all his other Uchiha stuff. And Sakura's been working so hard on her Kenjutsu. She's smart, and putting in her all. She took a sip of her beer. If they won't be ready now, when will they be? She tapped her forehead. Sensei's always saying the only thing you're missing is confidence, Obito, and he's right. When you were a kid. I was a kid. Obito was quiet, a little solemn. I didn't understand what the world was like. They both fell into a short silence. Invisible, choking dust filled the room. A long-gone gasp for air, a dull thud. It's going to be the safest exam in years, Rin said eventually. Maybe ever. Sensei doesn't want anything going wrong at this one. She leaned back, looking out the window. Cloud's still working on their weird chakra weapons, so they're not invited. I think they're the only one that's not, actually. That's how it is. It's all part of the game. She glanced back at Obito. They're not going to be in real danger. I know. Obito frowned. I get it. I know, Rin said. It's your decision to enter them in the end. I don't want to push you into it, but it'd be good for them. She set her beer down and stood up. And for you. Where you headed? Obito asked, and Rin smiled. Back to the hospital, she said. Even if this is going to be safe, it's still an exam, you know? Surprising things happen all the time. She winked. See you around. She walked out the front door as if it were hers and not his, and Obito watched her go. He looked back to the beer she'd left. Ah, he groaned, and leaned forward to toss the can in the trash. What's the worst that could happen? The Chunin exam. Sakura looked over, carefully sheathing her sword at her hip. Both the blade and the sheath had been a gift from Tintin, though Sakura had bought them with her own money. Her training partner had helped her pick out something that fit her and was comfortable to wear. It made her feel more real, like a proper ninja, to carry around a sword at her hip. She wasn't sure if that was immature or not, but Sakura enjoyed the feeling anyway. Sasuke had asked the question, looking at a piece of paper that Obito had offered him. Naruto was beside him, scratching his head and picking burned hairs off of it. The both of them had been sparring as Sakura slid through her kata, flowing from one sword strike to another, and Sasuke had ended up catching some of Naruto's blonde hair on fire with a small jutsu. Do you think we're ready, Obito-sensei? Naruto asked, and Obito smirked at the quick correction. I'm not sure, he said, and Sakura walked over to join them, staring at the paper curiously. It was a sign-up form, she realized, for the next Chunin exam. Were they that close already? She knew they were a regular thing, but for some reason hadn't even thought they were coming up so soon. The paper said January 1st, only a week and some away. But like with a lot of things about being a shinobi, there's only one way to find out. He looked around at them, his gaze lingering on Sakura. To her surprise, she didn't flinch back. After 6 months on the team, she could meet Obito's gaze without fear. You're stronger. You're figuring out what being a ninja means. How much of that voice was really her, she wondered. It always felt too ambitious, a little too resentful. She wasn't like that, was she? Sakura wasn't ambitious and didn't resent people. At least, she didn't think so. But Sakura couldn't deny herself. She was stronger. The fact she could look her sensei in the eyes without feeling like she didn't belong was proof of that. You guys will be the ones entering, their sensei continued. The decision's yours, even if I'm the one who turns the paper in. He crossed his arms. So what do you think? Sakura was sure that both her teammates would jump on the opportunity immediately and drag her into it. That was usually how it went, in her experience. But to her surprise, Naruto frowned and sat down, some of his hair still sizzling. I dunno, he said after a moment, and Sakura stared at him. Naruto, what do you mean? She asked, and her teammate looked up at her in confusion. I thought you don't want to be a Chunin? Naruto was the ambitious one. Naruto was the one who had figured out the Rasengan in just a couple months. I do, Naruto said. I definitely do. But… Oh, Sasuke said quietly. You idiot. You don't want to try unless you're gonna pass. Hey, Naruto shot to his feet. There's nothing stupid about that. Is that true, Naruto? Obito asked, and Naruto shifted. Sorta. Sasuke's a dumbass, so he's not saying it right. Sasuke smirked, and Naruto sneered at him. Sakura watching the back and forth with amusement. It's like, the Chunin exam is a pretty big deal. I don't want to be one of those guys who takes it like 10 times, you know? He looked around at his teammates. If we're gonna do it, I want to do it right, the first time. It's a good idea, Sasuke said with a small frown. Even if we don't pass, it's one of the best opportunities to meet ninja from other villages. He looked to their sensei. And you know that, right? That's why you brought this to us at all. It's our best chance to get stronger and learn more. Sasuke sighed. But I get it. Honestly, I don't want to fail either. Obito frowned. You can't let that hold you back. You'll fail sometimes, all of you, he said, and Sakura thought he sounded a little sad about that truth. That's life. If you avoid failure, you'll never improve. They pondered that for a second, and then Sakura stepped forward. Sensei. She wasn't really sure what she was going to say. I think. What did she think? They were looking at her now. What if she didn't have anything to say? I think that first C rank taught us all something, she finally decided, and both her teammates watched her with careful eyes. She was just stating the obvious, and they were wondering why. I think, all of us, we didn't really know that being a ninja would be like that. Blood in her hair. It was hot. Sakura shoved the memory back down where it had come from. The world's big, she said, and if you mess up, you'll die. She took a deep breath. But the Chunin exam's not like that, right? It's in the village. You're mostly right, Obito nodded. This one is taking place here, in Konoha, and most of the villages there are minor or allies. Sand, grass, river, tea, rain dash. Rain. Naruto quirked an eyebrow. I didn't think rain was either of those. His eyes went wide. Oh shit. He spun around. Sakura, I forgot. Obito cuffed him on the back of the head for his profanity, and Naruto shot him a glare before looking back at her. I forgot about your question. My question? Sakura asked, and Naruto spread his arms wide. Yeah, about my dad's teammates. Sakura blinked. Right. That had been weeks ago, the short snippet of conversation she'd heard in the Hokage's office. She'd completely forgotten about it afterwards. It had only been a passing interest. Your dad's teammates? Obito asked with a questioning look. None of them are around anymore. He frowned. They're all. Not. Naruto waved him off. Not his original team. I asked him about it. He wasn't talking about them. He was talking about some of his master's other students. Obito's eyes went a little wide. Oh, them. Them. Sasuke and Sakura asked at the same time, and they looked at each other with amusement. Sasuke made a deferential gesture, and Sakura giggled. Them? She asked again, alone this time. Them. Obito confirmed dramatically, and Sasuke rolled his eyes. Sensei was trained by the toad sage, Jiraiya. I trained with him as well, for a little while. Jiraiya-sensei had other students as well, a couple over the course of his life. He crossed his arms and sat down, and his students followed him. Their sensei was being really serious, Sakura thought. The feeling was in the air, like an invisible weight. He was telling them something important. There were three in particular that he picked up in the land of rain during the Second War. That was where the Sannin got their name. You know, they fought the leader of Amage Cure, Hanzo the Salamander, and they walked away, he said, and Naruto cocked his head. They didn't win, he asked, and Obito laughed. Hanzo was an incredible shinobi, he explained. They were all leaning in now. This wasn't as scary as it should have been, Sakura thought. They'd already seen what the world had to offer. Right now, she was just consumed by curiosity. Flee on sight, just like your dad. He could poison whole battlefields in an instant and controlled exploding tags like they were alive. The way people told me when I was a kid, you didn't fight Hanzo, you started suffocating and then suddenly exploded. He shrugged, but the Sannin managed to stalemate him, and so he declared that they were worthy of being recognized and spread their name to all of the countries across the world. I guess he was kinda a megalomaniac when I put it that way. Sasuke chuckled. It sounds that way, he said. Maybe he wanted them to be famous so it wouldn't be bad for his reputation, not being able to kill them. Maybe. Obito laughed. Maybe. But I got sidetracked. The point is, Jiraiya-sensei picked up 3 orphans in AIM and stayed behind to train them when the war was winding down. He was famous enough at that point to do that. So long as he stayed loyal, the village didn't care what he did with his time in a neutral country. Their sensei frowned. He told me once he thought they had potential. Never figured out what he meant by that. But he was definitely right in a way, because those 3 kids grew up into pretty spectacular shinobi. They must have been. Naruto cut in. They took over the country. Hey, Obito said, and Naruto smirked at him. I thought I was telling the story. You're going too slow, Naruto declared, and Obito fumed. I'm building it up, he said, and Sakura couldn't help but laugh. You've got no appreciation for that, Naruto. You can't just jump straight to the end. Well, that's the important part, right? Naruto asked. Those 3, Konan, Yahiko, and Nagato, Obito grunted, and Naruto nodded his head sagely. Konan, Yahiko, and Nagato. Do you know how they overthrew the country? The blonde shrugged, and Obito shook his head in despair. Sakura, however, was wondering about something else. Naruto, you meant the village, right? She asked, and her teammate gave her a confused look. Not the country. No, he's right, their sensei said. Though probably by accident. Naruto huffed, and Sakura leaned back, putting both her hands on the ground. They took over the entire country? All of the land of rain? She asked, and Obito nodded. What about what happened to the government? The daimyo? Imprisoned, Obito said, and both Sakura and her teammates had to take a moment to consider that. You couldn't just imprison the daimyo. The villages worked together with their country's governments. They didn't have the manpower or means to actually govern the countries themselves, and no desire to take up that burden. Doing otherwise was. So that's the trouble they're making then, Sakura said, and Obito shrugged. That was a long time ago, he said. The village hidden in the rain became the nation of rain over 10 years ago, though everyone still just treats them like a village. It's an unusual situation, after all. Wow, Sakura said, not really sure what else to say. Naruto frowned. I wasn't asking the right questions, he muttered to himself. Is that why I've never met Dad's master? He asked. Cause of this? Perceptive, Obito said, tapping his temple. Yeah, Jiraiya-sensei isn't exactly an outcast, but because of those orphans he decided to train, another village is rising. Rain has even started calling their leader, Yahiko, the Amicage. He rested his head in one hand. Sakura had never heard this before. To her knowledge, only the 5 largest villages had leaders who declared themselves Kage. Minor ones like Grass, or what Rain was supposed to be, wouldn't claim that title. It would be way too presumptuous. He couldn't have known, but people still blame him. That's just how it is, I guess. That's not fair, Sasuke said with a frown, and Obito pinned him with a glance. Things often aren't, he said, and Sakura could only watch helplessly as something passed unspoken between them. So, that's the answer to your question, Sakura, their sensei continued. You were saying something else before Naruto interrupted, weren't you? Naruto protested, and Sakura tried to remember where she'd been. I think we should sign up, she said after a moment. That's where I was going with that. If we pass, that'll be amazing, and if we fail, we'll know how not to next time. She looked at both her teammates. It can't be any worse than our C rank, right? I understand not wanting to do it more than once, but there's no real harm. I think we should go for it. She'd always been prepared to fail, Sakura thought. In that respect, the exam held no fear for her. Naruto gave her a doubting look, but Sasuke spoke before he could. She's right, he said, looking at Obito. Where do I sign? Naruto looked back and forth between the two of them and sighed. All right, he said good-naturedly. But if we're going to do this, we're going to win, right? Without a doubt, Sasuke said, his conviction almost tangible, and Sakura found herself agreeing with him, to her surprise. I think we can, she said. It's not 100%, but I think we're ready, Naruto. We can do it. Together, Obito said. He passed the paper to Sasuke and pointed out a signature line, and pulled a pen from one of his pockets. He kept speaking as Sasuke scribbled down his consent. If I know Sensei at all, the exam will be a test of teamwork more than anything else. If you guys can't work together, there's no way we'll pass. Well, that shouldn't be a problem then. Naruto grinned. We just stick together, we pass, we become Chunin. Then, he scratched his head. What do we do when we're Chunin, Obito-sensei? Well, you'll still be my team, Obito said. You've got to be under supervision at least a year, usually, before you can start taking missions on your own. That's barring circumstances, obviously, but you'll get some prestige and make a little more money. Cool, Naruto said. That sounds cool. I'm in. They all signed the form. Sakura tried not to read the bits about not being held liable for dismemberment or death too closely. When they were done, Obito packed it into his back pocket and stood back up. I'll turn this in, he said. As for you guys, if you're serious about passing, we should get training. The Chunin exam attracts the best of the best, genin-wise. It's a chance for all their villages to strut their stuff. He winked. So show off, would you? 2 days before the exam, foreign shinobi started entering the village. Sakura and her teammates had been training together with Might Guy's team. Tintin and her teammates were determined to take the exam as well, and Guy was equally determined to punch Obito in the face at least once. Though it hadn't been why she was there, Sakura had been having enormous fun sparring with Tintin and then taking breaks to watch Obito dance around Guy. Sasuke and Neji had competed as well, but Neji had trounced Sasuke without much effort, leaving him on the ground with a bruised solar plexus. Sakura had expected that to discourage Sasuke, but it had been just the opposite. Since Neji had beaten him, he'd relentlessly challenged the older boy, apparently desperate to defeat it. The gentle fist, the Hyuga martial art, was beautiful to watch, Sakura thought. Even if Neji was using it to relentlessly beat one of her teammates up, the flowing motions and complete lack of wasted movements that the martial art incorporated were amazing. She wondered if it would have any use for her sword. At one point Naruto had stepped in as well, and Neji had been happy to fight him and Sasuke at the same time. The result had been the same, the both of them on the ground, groaning and gasping for air. Sakura had never realized how glad she would be for Neji not to have any interest in defeating her before that. Tintin had laughed when she'd told her. He's like that, she'd said, as if it were inescapable as gravity. Sakura's hair was pink, the sun rose and set, and Neji beat anyone who challenged him into a semi-liquid paste, regardless of who they were. They were heading back to the center of the village, all 8 of them, when they met their first foreign ninja. He wasn't much to look at. The foreigner was a tall boy with pale hair and purple eyes. They nearly bumped into each other at a busy intersection filled with people heading every which way, and he looked down at Sakura, and then at all of the other ninja with her, taking in their hitate. Sakura couldn't help but notice his own. It was attached to his hip, apparently woven into his long black pants, and it had 3 straight lines drawn vertically down it. She didn't recognize the symbol. Hey, the shinobi said. Sakura's teammates crossed their arms. Both of the adults gave the boy a blank look. I'm kinda lost. You know where I can get a drink around here? Obito raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. A shinobi should be able to locate food on their own, he said dryly, and the boy grinned. His teeth were sharp and triangular, like a shark. Sakura had never seen teeth like that before in her life. She wondered if the boy had ever accidentally bitten his lip or tongue. Rude, he said. I didn't realize Konoha's shinobi were so inhospitable to guests. He fished beneath his shirt and withdrew a lanyard with a card on it. A visitation pass, Sakura saw after he stopped waving it around. It was a simple thing, something you could get at the gate if you were entering the village with a stranger. She'd only seen it once before. If this ninja was here for the Chunin exams, which he almost certainly was, it made perfect sense for him to have one. Ah, Lee stepped forward, all smiles. You must be here to compete. He gestured around. There are many spectacular restaurants and shops in the village. Perhaps one of them holds what you seek. The boy looked Lee up and down with an obvious expression of disbelief. Geez, he muttered. Never mind. I'm just going to find something myself. Don't make any trouble, Niji said placidly as the shinobi stepped past them, and the boy sneered. We'll be watching. Sure you will, the foreigner jeered. Don't worry. I'm saving all my trouble for the exam. Then he strode down the street and was gone in the press of people before Sakura knew it. What a blowhard, Sasuke muttered. He was from the nation of rain, Guy said, watching the shinobi go with keen eyes. I doubt he's truly lost. He glanced at Obito. Do you reckon they are all such troublemakers? He wasn't making any trouble, Obito said with a shrug. Just wandering. I'm sure it's fine. He tilted his head up slightly. And anyway, it looks like he's being watched. He was right, Sakura realized. She only caught a flicker of movement from one rooftop to another, over a nearby alleyway, but it was enough to tell her that a shinobi had just repositioned, moving after the boy with shark teeth. Her sensei wasn't worried, and so she wasn't either, but it did make her curious. What about that ninja merited being monitored? Was the village keeping tabs on every foreigner who entered? Well, it wasn't any of her business, in the end. Come on, Obito said. He had one idea right. We should get something to eat. Team 7 said their goodbyes to Guy and his team and made their way down the street, into the depths of the village, and were soon lost in the mazes of buildings and masses of people. The day of the exam, Sakura arrived at the academy, where the first stage was being held. When she arrived, she wasn't surprised to find Sasuke and Obito there as well. Naruto was late, as usual. Morning. She was a little subdued in her greeting, and they gave her a nod in return. There were butterflies in her stomach. Signing up for the exam had been one thing. It actually being here was another. Had she been thinking straight? They'd only been genin for 6 months. All of the other competitors would have at least a year on them, surely. Actually, Sensei, she asked as they waited in silence outside the gates of the academy. Did any other teams beside Tintin's enter the exam? I never asked before. A couple, he said, scratching his chin. I know that other than Guy, both Asuma and Kurenai have put their teams in the mix. He noticed her look of confusion. That's 8 and 10. 8. Hinata, Shino, and Kiba, and 10. Shikamu, Ino, and Choji. Sakura felt herself relax a little. They weren't going in alone. They wouldn't be the only new graduates there. At least they wouldn't look like overconfident idiots, or at least look like that alone. Hey, Naruto ran up out of breath and completely severed Sakura's train of thought. Sorry. My dad made a big breakfast. The Hokage? Sakura asked, and Naruto nodded. He's a really good cook, he said with a grin. Mom, he wobbled his hand. Not so much. Did I miss anything? Not really, Naruto, their sensei said. We were just standing here, staring at the door, waiting for you. Ah, that was nice of you, Naruto said, either not detecting or not willing to acknowledge Obito's tone. We heading in then? Soon as I give you a little advice, Obito said, turning to regard them all. Stick together. Don't treat this like the end of the world. It's just a test. Do your best, and we'll all be proud of you. Thank you for the wisdom, Sasuke said rather dryly, and Sakura giggled. Her fingers were drumming on the hilt of her sword, she realized. She was definitely nervous, but she couldn't deny there was an eagerness there as well. She wanted to get started. Anything solid? Nah. Obito shrugged. You'll be fine. Good luck. Without preamble or another parting word, he vanished in a swirl of space and time and left Team 7 alone in front of the academy. Well, Sakura said, should we head in? Let's, Sasuke confirmed, and he took the lead, striding ahead towards the front door. He opened it without fear, and his teammates followed him. They were supposed to meet in room 302, the largest room in the building, and they took the familiar stairs as if it were any other days. There was a large congregation of shinobi on the second floor, arguing with two chunin. Sakura gave them a confused look as she passed them heading farther up the building, wondering what they were wasting time for. She wondered if it was a trick. Had they been given the wrong room? But when they reached the third floor and Sasuke stepped into 302, she became sure that wasn't the case. The room was full of shinobi, well over 100, by Sakura's guess. 302 was the size of an auditorium, and it had a high ceiling, so it didn't quite feel cramped, but it was definitely approaching it. Looking around, Sakura saw Hitayate from a dozen different villages, as well as quite a few Konoha headbands. She caught a glimpse of Tintin and her team across the room, and waved. Tintin gave a distracted wave back, engrossed in conversation with Niji. Ah! The quiet exclamation came from to her left, and Sakura turned towards it. Sasuke? And Naruto, and Sakura? You're here too. Hinata Hyuga, looking small but not afraid, stepped past a press of shinobi debating the finer points of knife work with a smile. I'm glad. Of course they're here. Kiba was right behind her, shoving his way through the group Hinata had skirted and baring his fangs at one who tried to shove him back. They'd look like a bunch of idiots if they weren't, wouldn't they? That's not very nice, Kiba. Hinata frowned, and Sakura smiled. It's good to see you, Hinata, she said, and the Hyuga smiled back. Her pale, empty eyes had scared Sakura a little when they'd first met, but after years of being classmates now she barely noticed them. We heard Team 10 was here too. Have you seen them? They haven't arrived yet, Hinata said, fidgeting a little. Kiba laughed. Shikamaru must be holding them up. Or Choji. He nodded, 100% sure of his assessment. They never were the fastest. What about Shino? Naruto asked with a confused look. Isn't he here with you? I am. Naruto jumped, looking behind him. Shino had approached without a sound. None of them had noticed him approaching. This promises to be an interesting exam. What? He gestured around. Look at the number of villages. This must be unusual. He was right, Sakura thought. There really were a lot of different villages here. Minor ones of every kind, including several she didn't recognize. She even caught a glimpse of a stone Hitayate, which surprised her. There were several different teams from Sunagakure as well, clustered in the corner. They seemed to be keeping to themselves, more than anyone else. One of them, Sakura realized with a jolt, was staring at them as they chatted by the door. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor in the middle of the group, a large gourd strapped to his back. The boy looked strange. Like Hinata, he didn't have pupils, but his eyes weren't the milky white of the Byakugan. They were green, closer to teal, and their striking color was only accentuated by the thick bags beneath the shinobi's eyes and his lack of eyebrows. He had a red tattoo on his forehead as well, which only threw them further into contrast. He looked incredibly tired, Sakura thought, but he was still totally alert. His eyes shifted, locking with her own, and Sakura realized he'd been looking to her right, to Naruto and Sasuke. They stared at each other for a moment, and Sakura felt rooted in place. She didn't know what was causing it, but the sensation of frozen time was eerily familiar. It was just like it had been in the temple, she thought. That was it, when Haiden had leapt up on the wall and stared at them, ready to attack at the first sign of movement. That was what was happening. Sakura felt herself break into a cold sweat. Her hand tightened around her sword. 3, 4, 5 seconds. Eventually, very deliberately, Sakura slowly dragged her gaze away, staring at the floor, and she felt the pressure fade. Sakura? Hinata was the one who noticed. Naruto and Sasuke were busy arguing with Kiba about who would finish the exam first, and Shino was watching the whole thing with his usual unreadable expression. What's wrong? That boy, she said quietly, and both teams hushed up at her tone. He's staring at us. Hey, Naruto demanded. Who's staring at us? He looked around. That sand creep. He made a shooing motion, and to Sakura's horror, the boy with green eyes smiled. It wasn't an expression with any joy. He just showed his teeth, his cheeks wrinkling. Geez, Sasuke said as the boy turned away and murmured something to a tall blonde girl beside him. What a freak. He's not the only one, Hinata said timidly. Watching, I mean. A couple teams have been watching you three since you arrived. Who? Sasuke asked, and Hinata blushed, pointing discreetly around the room. That team, from Stone. She was right. 2 girls and 1 boy, all with pitch-black hair, all staring intently at Naruto. He stuck his tongue out at them, and they turned away, whispering amongst themselves. And that team, from Amigakure. Hinata tilted her head, and Sakura followed the vector. To her surprise, she found she recognized one of the shinobi discreetly eyeing them. It's that boy, she said, and Sasuke nodded his head in agreement. From the market. The boy with shark teeth nodded at her, recognizing that she'd noticed his observation, and Sakura decided the only thing she could really do was nod back. Like everyone else in the room, he had 2 teammates with him. They were both seated at one of the many desks scattered throughout the room. One of them, an older boy with gray hair and large, round glasses, was peaceably chatting with a team from the land of rivers, gesturing widely and smiling guileless. He had a very friendly smile, Sakura thought, but it was impossible to know if it was genuine. The other was a girl with sharp, beautiful features and warm brown eyes. Unlike her teammates, who had minimalistic brown clothes that didn't express much identity but were certainly warm and convenient, she wore a short haori over a pure white shirt and a long black skirt. Sakura had to admit the haori had an interesting and eye-catching design. It was dark black, but there were a series of asymmetrical red clouds woven into the material, covering the back and sleeves. Like the boy from Sand, the girl from Rain caught Sakura's eye, but this time she didn't feel the need to run away. Instead, she smiled, and Sakura smiled back uncertainly. Wonder why they're watching us, Naruto said, his hands behind his head. Behind him, Team 10 slipped into the room, squabbling amongst themselves. Sakura waved at Ino, and the blonde girl gave her a dismissive one in turn as she continued to badger Shikamaru relentlessly. Duh, Kiba smirked. He pointed at Naruto, Hokage's son, then to Sasuke, fancy Uchiha, then last, to Sakura, pink hair. He finished, and Sakura resisted the urge to both roll her eyes and shrivel up a little. Was that all? Eyes front. Sakura turned in surprise at the words, just in time to watch over a dozen ninja materialize in a cloud of smoke at the front of the room. A moment later, she realized that she hadn't heard anything. The voice had rung through her head, but there hadn't been a sound accompanying it. In fact, she hadn't been the only one to turn. The whole room had at the same time, at the same not sound. The ninja were diverse. One of them was an Uchiha, 2 of them were Hyuga, and all of the others were distinct, but the shinobi in front drew the most attention. He was a tall man with a strong, broad face, and had a golden ponytail that went down past his waist. He wore a flak jacket and a red vest over it. Ah, crap, Ino muttered, coming up next to her. Sakura glanced back and forth between her classmate and the man at the front, and realized they had the same hair and similar eyes. They were definitely related. Good morning, the Yamanaka said, his voice deep and steady. It was the same voice Sakura and the rest of the room had heard in their head. Since you all seem to be getting along so well, the exam will now commence. He looked around the room, taking them all in instantly. As I'm sure you're aware, there will be no fighting without permission from the proctors. You have already obeyed that admirably. I hope that will continue to be the case. He began pacing, hands clasped behind his back and ponytail slightly swaying with the motion. This exam will be divided into 3 distinct tests, he said, enunciating every word. His voice carried to the back of the room without effort. I am Inoichi Yamanaka, and this first test will be under my purview. He came to a stop. There are, throughout this and the neighboring building, 34 specially prepared rooms. It is not a coincidence that this is the same number of teams that are present here today. They would each get their own room for the test. Sakura looked around, taking in the other ninjas' reactions. Many were doing the same thing she was. Some were telling jokes, and a few just stared ahead with a razor focus. Each of you will be sealed in one of those rooms, Inoichi said, and a murmur passed around the crowd. You will be presented with an objective, accomplish it, and depart the room, and you will pass the test. His eyes narrowed. If you leave the room without accomplishing the objective, you will have abandoned the mission. You will be disqualified. If you fail to accomplish the objective, you will be disqualified. His eyes closed completely. Do not think you'll be able to deceive me if you cannot accomplish the objective, because I will. No. Sakura heard the voice again, and she was sure that everyone else did too. The man was speaking directly to their minds. Was it a bluff, or could he really read them that easily? She decided she didn't want to find out. Easy, Sasuke muttered, and Sakura looked over to find him practically trembling with anticipation. He was excited, much more excited than her. The same, she saw, was true for Naruto. Her team was raring to go. Now, you all understand what is required of you, Inoichi said, raising his hand. He snapped his fingers, and the shinobi behind him fanned out, a couple creating clones. The space descended into organized chaos as the various teams were gathered up and herded out of various doors towards their assigned rooms. Thus, the first test shall begin. 30 minutes. The door closed behind them, and then, to Sakura's astonishment, it vanished. What kind of trick was that? Sasuke experimentally kicked at the spot where the door had once been, and Naruto flinched. Hey, he shouted, and his friend looked over his shoulder at him. Careful, what if it was just an illusion? We'll get disqualified for busting out. It's not an illusion. Sasuke's eyes were red. It really did disappear. Huh. Naruto wandered up as well, and gave the wall a kick of his own. Sakura watched both her teammates, resisting the urge to laugh. That's crazy. I wonder how Later, Sasuke said, moving back towards the center of the room. Doesn't matter now. Sakura, what do we have? The room was small and drab, less than 15 feet from wall to wall. The only piece of furniture was a desk in the center, upon which was a single piece of paper. There were no windows. The walls were covered in paper as well, embossed with kanji. They swirled across the entire room like a madman scrawling, some even making their way onto the ceiling. Looking around at the sheer number of symbols, Sakura felt totally overwhelmed. On the wall opposite where the door had been, there was a small electronic keypad. Unlike everything else, it was simple, just 10 digits, not even an enter key. I don't know, she admitted to Sasuke. 30 minutes, I guess. He gave her a light-hearted smirk, and Sakura smiled back, a little proud of making her teammate laugh, even if it wasn't out loud. She picked up the paper on the desk, looking over it with a critical eye. At first glance, it was just more nonsense, a series of tightening concentric rings composed of both kanji and simple symbols. The spiral made Sakura a little dizzy, and she rotated the paper, following the chain of kanji. At the center, there was something coherent, written out in circular katakana, access code. Naruto looked as dizzy as Sakura felt, twisting his head to try and follow the kanji. I don't get it. It's a cipher? Sakura ventured, and was relieved when Sasuke nodded in agreement. He frowned, his Sharingan slowly rotating as he regarded both the paper and the walls around them. It's a cipher, Sasuke confirmed. But the actual code. He spun, regarding the whole room. All I can see initially is that it corresponds to the cardinal directions. Sakura blinked, looking at the paper and then at the room's four walls. He was right. Specific combinations of numbers appeared on the north, south, east, and west walls, and they matched patterns on the four corners of the paper. But where did it lead from there? What was the relationship of the kanji to the points of the compass? They needed a code for the keypad. How long would it be? Naruto, she asked as she and Sasuke continued to intensely glare at the paper. Can you go press a number on the keypad? Which one? He asked, scratching the back of his head, and Sakura blew out a frustrated breath. Anyone, she said, and Naruto shrugged and wandered over to the keypad to do just that. He pressed one of the keys, and the top of the pad lit up with a dim, fluorescent 7. How many does it look like it would fit? She asked, and Naruto squinted at the small electronic number. 5, I think, he said after a moment, and Sasuke looked over as well. The 7 faded a couple seconds later, leaving the pad blank once more. 5. He agreed, and Sakura bit her lip. For directions, each with a dedicated combination of kanji, but 5 numbers for the code in total. The mission was obvious. They needed to decipher the ridiculous access code and use it to get them out of the room. And now they only had about 28 minutes to do it. Okay, she sighed. Let's figure this out. Obito Uchiha sat down on the wooden bench and groaned, leaning back with his hands coming up behind his head and his legs stretching out before him. He rotated his neck, trying to work a kink out. He'd been way too tense all morning. Safest exam in years, Rin had said. He believed her, but seeing how many ninja had shown up had sparked a bit of sharp concern in the back of his head. It was an unusually large exam this year, with some exceptional entrants. No matter how well proctored it was, there was plenty of room for things to go wrong. Hey, Obito. Obito looked left. Asuma Sarutobi, as ever, had a cigarette dangling from his mouth. Beside him, Kurenai Yuhi gave a non-committal wave, and Obito lazily waved back at the both of them. The halls of the academy were bustling, but everyone who passed stepped around the two of them without complaint. Asuma, his fellow teacher, sat down at his side, and Kurenai at the other side of him. Obito continued to try and work out his neck. You're sticking around too? It's only going to be another 10 minutes or so, Asuma said, scratching at his stubble. Be stupid not to, I'd say. Heh. Obito leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees and stretching out his back. I guess so. You all right there? Kurenai asked with an amused lilt, and Obito snorted. Just a little tense, he said, and Kurenai let out a short laugh. She was always composed, and her laugh reflected that, Obito thought. She never let it get away from her. He could see the appeal. It wasn't any wonder she and Asuma had been going steady for over a year now. No need to be, she said, crossing her arms and legs and watching two bickering Chunin pass. Surely, your team will be fine. Yeah, they'll be fine. Obito straightened up. It's the others I'm worried about. Oh, Asuma looked over with a cocked eye, and Obito blinked. Shit, that came out wrong, he muttered. I didn't mean dash. Asuma laughed. I know what you mean, he said, taking a drag from his cigarette and holding it down between his legs and 2 fingers. The smoke from it wandered up, caressing his face. I've been thinking the same thing. And me, Kurenai added in. It's an interesting exam this year. How have your teams been doing? Obito asked. I've been self-absorbed as ever. I haven't really been keeping up. Another one of his bad habits. Good, Asuma said, twirling the cigarette around his fingers and leaving a complex smoke figure in its wake. Obito snorted. That was a neat trick. He must have been shaping it with his chakra. He was almost tempted to take a glance with his Sharingan. It's the Inoshikaicho, but the kids have been putting their own spin on it. He took another drag. Ino's really matured in the last couple months, and Shikamaru's always been smart enough to keep out of trouble. Choji's the only one I'm not sure about right now, but I'm sure they'll get him through any problems. That's why I entered them. It'll be a good learning experience. It's the same with every team, I think, Kurenai said. I feel the same way about Hinata. She's not quite there yet, but this might be all it takes. Obito frowned. You're not expecting them to pass? Kurenai shrugged. They might, she said, and Asuma nodded in agreement. It's possible, but I'm not putting any money on them making Chunin on their first try. This is a learning experience, first and foremost. Oh, Asuma elbowed him, and Obito shoved him back good-naturedly. Maybe you're feeling differently? Naruto and Sasuke don't want to take the exam more than once, Obito said with a grin, and both of his fellow teachers laughed. You know how they can get. They must have dragged Sakura into it then. Asuma grinned. Well, maybe dash. Actually, Obito leaned back, quirking his lips. It was the other way around. Oh, Kurenai looked over Asuma's shoulder, her red eyes growing a little wider. That's unusual. I think Sakura is looking at it the same way you two are, Obito said, looking behind him, out one of the academy's windows. It was a sunny day, but it wasn't very warm. Depending on where it was held, that could make the second portion of the exam interesting. She's not hung up on winning. She just wants more experience. Asuma put out his cigarette, burning it to ash in his hands and wiping the soot on his pant leg. He was careful to avoid the white mark that always hung from his hip, emblazoned with the symbol of fire. Obito didn't know much about Asuma's time with Guardian Ninja, the dozen shinobi who were entrusted with the protection of the daimyo over their lives. He'd never taken much interest in politics, even with his sensei taking up the Hokage's position. She always seemed smart. She had the grades for it. Top kunoichi, right? Jounin picked for training duties were encouraged to keep a close eye on the graduating classes, and Asuma was the son of the Sandaime besides. He'd always taken an interest in the education of younger shinobi. Yes, Kurenai confirmed. Lower taijutsu marks than Hinata, and lower teamwork marks than Ino, but she still beat out both of them everywhere else. For all the other girls in the class, it wasn't even a competition. She glanced at Obito. Still on your team. It was hard for her. At first, Obito admitted. Naruto and Sasuke I should say, aren't subtle. Both his fellow teachers chuckled. Without a doubt. Still, if she's the one who pushed them into it, it seems like she's maturing faster. Asuma frowned. A little surprising, I guess. We'll see, Obito said. He wasn't sure himself. If they pass this first test, then the rest of the exam will probably show us for sure. Of course, Kurenai said, and then paused. Depending on who they come up against. What do you mean? Obito asked. Asuma started to reach for another cigarette, and Kurenai grabbed his hand and set it back in his lap. The Sarutobi scowled at his girlfriend. Sand and rain, mostly, Kurenai said. They both sent interesting teams this year. I'll say, Asuma said, his scowl fading. I'm surprised Sand sent their Jinchuriki. They must really be confident in the alliance, to show him off. That's probably all they're doing, Obito said idly. Showing him off. Gaara of the desert, right? I heard from Kushina that he's got an impressive record. Asuma nodded. He's already been sent on an A-rank mission, he said, and Obito made a surprised noise at the back of his throat. On purpose, I mean, Asuma said with a laugh. He's the Kazekage's son. The guy seems confident in him. He's even here in person to watch him compete. His laugh turned into a frown. But something's off about him. The kid, not the Kazekage. I'm not sure if you had a chance to see him. No, Obito said. I try not to stalk any of the new arrivals. Didn't want to give the wrong impression. My team ran into him yesterday, Asuma said, his frown deepening. He's not normal. Beyond the obvious, I mean. He's got. Asuma paused, searching for the words. He's a killer, he eventually decided. I think he enjoys it. Shit. Asuma was a good judge of character. It was something he'd inherited from his father. If he could have told Obito that based on a single encounter with Sand's Jinchuriki, then Obito had no doubt it was true. If that's the case, they'll notice, Kurenai said, talking about their teams. And hopefully stay out the way. Yeah, Obito said, crushing the churning in his gut. His team had already seen someone who held killing close to his heart. They'd know the signs and take care of themselves. He had to believe that. Honestly, I'm more worried about the team from Rain, Kurenai continued. Sending a Jinchuriki is one thing. A member of the Akatsuki is another. Oh, Asuma asked, as Obito sat up in shock. Really? He asked, and Kurenai nodded. Hinata spotted him 2 days ago and asked me about the clouds, she said. The boy wears a haori with the design, but it's unmistakable. He's definitely a member, despite his youth. Well, doesn't mean anything on its own. Asuma muttered, cracking a knuckle. He was starting to fidget without a new cigarette to focus on. You don't get into the Akatsuki based on your strength, just your dedication to their mission. If you were that dedicated to their mission, why would you even participate in the exam at all? Obito asked, and Asuma shrugged. Rain is full of hypocrites, he said, and Kurenai laughed. No point in worrying about it. I'm sure if they're actually Akatsuki, the village is already keeping an eye on them. The Yondaime wouldn't let one of them walk around without being watched. Obito remembered the boy from Rain his team and guys had met before, the one with shark teeth and strange, pale skin. He'd had an escort, Yimbiyu watching from the rooftops, just as Asuma had supposed. The Sandaime's son was right. His sensei was aware that the team of an Akatsuki member couldn't go unsupervised. Yeah, he said slowly. Yeah, nothing to worry about. Plenty to worry about. Asuma grunted, and Obito chuckled. But for us, not the kids. He glanced around, looking for a clock. How much longer? 5 minutes, Kurenai said. Things will be wrapping up soon. Interesting test this year, Obito remarked. Having to escape a room. I remember ours tested information gathering. I guess this one is critical thinking. Asuma shrugged. It might be that straightforward. The proctors are all straightforward guys this year. He grinned. But it wouldn't be much of a shinobi exam if it weren't testing more than one thing, would it? This is bullshit, Naruto declared, and Sakura found herself agreeing with him 100%. Her teammate was pacing, looking like he was ready to claw at the walls with his bare hands. Sasuke wasn't moving, just staring at the cipher with his Sharingan active, stock still, but Sakura could tell he was just as frustrated as Naruto, maybe even more so. 3 minutes, Sasuke muttered, and Sakura found herself looking back to the paper one last time. They'd finished most of it by the 10-minute mark, plenty of time to spare, or so she'd thought. The first 4 digits had been 3347. But now, they didn't have a fifth. The cardinal points had been simple enough to decipher once she and Sasuke had figured out the pattern behind the kanji. They'd been puns, of all things. She'd figured that out before Sasuke had. Geography puns, mountain, river, forest, valley, with the final number determined by stroke order and number of the signature kanji. It was incredibly complicated, but not an unbeatable cipher like Sakura had been fearing, just a tough one delivered in the most confusing manner possible. Or maybe it was, because they didn't have a final piece. Naruto had already run through what they'd managed to understand, and every possible missing fifth digit, and the keypad had rejected him with an angry red light each time. It didn't make any sense. They were missing something that restructured the cipher entirely, or somehow they just got it totally and completely wrong from the beginning. 2 minutes, Sasuke muttered. Sasuke, could you dash? Sakura started to bite out, and then held it back, startled at her own tone. Was she really that frustrated? She'd been ready to fail, right? Being ready isn't the same as liking it. 2 minutes. Naruto paced forward, glaring at the table. Damn it. Stupid puzzle. He struck out in frustration, kicking the table with most of his strength and sending the cipher paper flying. The table flew up in the air, flipping end over end, and Sasuke's eyes went wide. He darted forward and caught one of the table legs, holding it in the air, and Sakura saw what had caught his eye. There was something carved in the bottom of the table, deep in the wood. Come on, she said, not sure if she was about to laugh or cry, and Sasuke grunted and set the table down upside down, its legs sticking up in the air like a wooden spider as he bent down and examined the symbol carved into the base. It was the symbol for fire, surrounded by a spiral. There were arrows at the exit of the spiral. Just like when she'd first entered the room, Sakura was momentarily overwhelmed by the symbol's complexity, but she saw Sasuke's Sharingan darting over it effortlessly, taking everything in. No way. Naruto breathed out, staring at the kanji. He looked over at Sakura. We're not that stupid, right? We just had to look underneath dash. Inverted, Sasuke declared, standing back up straight. Sakura didn't know what he meant. The spiral inverts the kanji. It comes out. His eyes went wide. Backwards. We are that stupid. Quit calling us stupid, Naruto shouted, already sprinting for the pad. Just tell me what to do. Less than 80 seconds now. Sasuke called out the code as Sakura stared at the bottom of the table, wondering what would have happened if Naruto hadn't kicked it. They'd been so caught up in the symbols on the paper and the walls, searching for an answer similar to the rest, that they hadn't even bothered to look underneath what they were given. What kind of lesson was that? 47433. Naruto rattled off as he punched in the numbers. The pad blinked green, the sharp light on top of it pulsing. Hell yeah, Naruto declared. It took it. They waited 10 seconds. Nothing happened. 70 seconds remaining. Up, Sakura said. There's no door. She wasn't sure what she'd expected from cracking the code, but nothing hadn't been on the list. Naruto looked around. Maybe we just gotta wait. The proctor said if we didn't leave the room we'd fail, Sasuke said, closing his eyes. Maybe they were lying? No. Sakura shook her head. It can't be that. The realization came to her in a flash, and she couldn't suppress her laughter. We have to make our own door. 50 seconds left. Naruto pounded his knuckles together and approached the spot where the door had vanished 29 minutes before. Leave it to me, he grinned. You guys solve that crap. I can solve this. He spread his feet, putting one hand out before him and cradling it with the other. Sakura and Sasuke both backed up as the distinctive whine of the Rasengan started emanating from Naruto's hand. 30 seconds. Naruto put more chakra into the jutsu than he had the last time Sakura had seen it, and it swelled up to half the size of his head. He stepped back, bracing himself. Rasengan, he declared, and drove the jutsu directly into the wall. The results were impressive. The wall twisted, the distortion passing so quickly that Sakura would have missed it if she blinked, and then exploded outward, the jutsu detonating in Naruto's palm and sending him stumbling back several steps. The force of the Rasengan tore a hole through the wall all the way up to and past the ceiling and 3 or 4 feet to either side of where Naruto had struck the building. They waited in stoic silence for a moment as some more rubble rained from the ceiling and Naruto shook out his hand, hissing. Yuch, he muttered. Didn't realize there'd be that much kick. That wall was hard as hell. Slowly, a Chunin with flat eyes and flatter hair poked his head around the corner, looking at the extent of the devastation Naruto had caused. He whistled, looked back to them, and then past them, to the blinking green light on the keypad. A little overboard, don't you think? He asked, and Sasuke smirked. Only if we didn't pass, he said, and Naruto giggled. He seemed a little too excited at having gotten a chance to Rasengan something. Was that a verb? Sakura wondered. The Chunin scratched his chin, looking at a loss for words. Not sure if that was the intended solution, he admitted after a second, and Sakura blushed, feeling embarrassed for no reason. But, you cracked the code, and you got out of the room. I guess you pass. He straightened up, giving them a sardonic bow. And with 20 seconds to spare. Congratulations. Yeah, no problem. Naruto waved him off, and Sakura smiled. Definitely we're not panicking, she said, and the Chunin laughed. Well, just about everyone else is already on their way, he said. You guys better get going if you want to catch up. The second test will be starting in about 10 minutes. You're not going to bring us there? Naruto asked, and the ninja snorted. You're a shinobi, and of the leaf. You can find your way, he said with a grin. Training ground 44. You better hurry. He turned around, walking down the hall and out of sight. Beat it. I'll pass on the good news. No need. Sakura heard the voice again, and she saw her teammates react as well. Well done, you 3. Good thinking on your feet. Make your way to the training ground. Team 7 looked around, and then burst into motion. It would have been stupid to pass the first test by just a couple seconds, and then be late for the second. They hurtled into the hallway, past the startled Chunin, and leapt out the nearest open window one after the other. Sakura had to be careful not to catch her sheath on the windowsill. It wasn't an extension of her body yet, but it was getting there. She was sure of it. Good luck. They arrived at the outskirts of the 44th training ground with a couple minutes to spare, and came to a stop, panting. Even for a shinobi, running more than halfway across Konohagakure in a little over 5 minutes was a challenge. Okay, Naruto decided. This whole test is stupid, not just that puzzle. Quit whining, Sasuke said, blowing out a breath and steadying himself. He nodded his head at the mass of shinobi beyond the gate leading to the training zone. Looks like quite a few passed. He was right. The group was noticeably smaller than it had been starting out, but from a quick glance Sakura could tell there were still at least 20 teams in the mix. She and her teammates hopped the fence, clearing 15 feet with ease, and ambled into the midst of the group, looking for familiar faces. Tintin found her before Sakura did anyone else. Hey, the older girl said, wandering up and giving Sakura a slap on the shoulder. You passed. Nice. Barely, Sakura said. We had trouble with the test. Naruto looked like he wanted to say something, but after a second just frowned and nodded. Really? Tintin asked, looking askance at them. What did you guys have? We just had to eavesdrop on another room. Sasuke narrowed his eyes. What? Yeah, Tintin said, looking puzzled. There was a code we had to figure out, but it was way too complicated. There was no way we could have done it ourselves. Most of the answer was in the room next to ours, though. Niji just looked through the wall and dash. Naruto slapped himself in the face, hard, and groaned. Sakura just closed her eyes, wanting to shrink down into the ground. At her side, she could practically hear Sasuke grinding his teeth. Wait. Tintin started giggling. Wait, did you guys just solve it? She started laughing. Geez, how smart are you? You actually solved that thing. Smart enough to solve the cipher, Sasuke said quietly. It was the first time Sakura had heard him express anything like embarrassment or self-deprecation. Not smart enough to know we didn't have to. Tintin just kept giggling, and her teammates wandered over, wondering what she was laughing about. Don't worry about it, she wheezed, waving off Lee's inquisitive look. God, that's too funny. She saw Sakura's face and shook her head. Cheer up. You three must be geniuses if you managed that. Don't feel like it, Sakura muttered, and Tintin descended back into laughter. Look at it this way, she said with a cough, finally getting full control of herself. There's 22 teams here now. That means more than a third dropped out on the first test. You did great. Guess they were the dumb without the dumb muscle, Naruto said, putting his hands behind his head, and Sakura finally found herself laughing as well. Well put, Neji said mildly. Of course, even more will fail this test. That's exactly right. The voice was huge and booming, and a mutter of surprise rapidly spread through the crowd of shinobi. Sakura turned around to find a giant striding towards her. She stumbled backwards in shock. The man was over 12 feet tall, with bright red hair that was longer than she was tall, and a perpetual grin stuck to his face. He moved through the crowd, and it parted before him like a wave, no one wanting to be stepped on. When he reached the front, he turned to them, putting his back to the forest, and scanned the astonished ninja, his enormous head slowly moving back and forth. That's exactly right, he said once again. Welcome. I am Chozuru Kimichi, the proctor for the second test. How is everyone doing today? No one present said a thing, either because they didn't want to answer, or because they were too surprised to. Sakura glanced over and found Team 10 watching the man intently. Choza looked just like Choji, the same way Inoichi had looked just like Ino. He might have been his father. She'd never had much interest in Choji. She certainly didn't know that he came from a clan of giants. Fantastic, Choza said, taking the silence in stride. So, 22 of you passed, did you? Well done, all of you. He reached behind him, into an enormous pouch resting on his lower back, his huge fingers moving dexterously. Unfortunately, this next test will be more challenging. He removed something from the pouch, his huge hands hiding it completely. This training ground is often referred to as the Forest of Death. He grinned. Shinobi love their jokes, as I'm sure you all know. The training ground is about 20 kilometers in diameter, and at the center of the forest, there is a tower, quite large and distinctive. You cannot miss it. Like you, someone muttered, and a ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. Choza chuckled along with them. Indeed, he said. Now, to pass this test, you simply need to reach that tower. You will have 48 hours to do so once the test begins. He looked around at all of them, his grin widening. Of course, there is a condition. Naruto nudged Sakura, and she glanced at him. He jerked his head, and she followed the motion to find the girl from Rain, the one wearing a black haori with red clouds, watching them out of the corner of her eye. The girl saw Sakura's attention and shifted, whispering something to her teammate. The gray-haired boy laughed and nodded. Sakura really wished they wouldn't do that. It creeped her out. At least the boy with a gourd from sand wasn't watching them too. His team had passed, and they were near the front of the group silently and intently staring at Choza. The huge Akimichi brought his hand down and opened it up, revealing 10 scrolls in his palm. They were small and tan, and seemed even more so lying in such a large hand. Each was marked with a symbol on the side. I have 10 scrolls here, Choza said, his voice rumbling. These will be critical to your success. If you do not arrive at the tower within 48 hours, you will be disqualified. If you arrive at the tower without a scroll, you will be disqualified. His smile grew even wider, screwing his eyes up and transitioning from good humor to almost mocking. If you arrive with 2 scrolls, you will be disqualified. To pass the test, you must present both a heaven, he pointed at one symbol, and then the other, and an earth scroll at the tower. There are 5 of each here, obviously. So only 5 teams would pass the test? Less than a fourth of those present? Sakura blinked, realizing her error. Wait, no? It was Dash. If you show up with both scrolls, you get DQ'd? One of the shinobi from Sand asked, and Choza ponderously nodded. The boy cocked his head, the large object wrapped in bandages on his back shifting slightly with the motion. But you can't pass unless you present both scrolls. Precisely, Choza grinned. Glad you understand. Oh, Sakura murmured, and Sasuke looked over at her curiously. What? He mouthed, and Naruto caught the motion and looked too. Sakura looked back and forth between them. Team up, she mouthed, and she saw the same realization strike her teammates. It was obvious. If they couldn't hold both scrolls themselves, but they needed both to pass the test, they'd have no choice but to work with another team with an opposite scroll. They'd both arrive at the tower and present their scrolls simultaneously. That was the only answer to the paradox. Sakura looked around. There were 6 Konoha teams, Hinata's, Ino's, Tintin's, and 2 more that she didn't know. That meant that with some luck and coordination, all of the Leaf teams could pass and leave just 4 from the other villages. Was that on purpose? She saw the other shinobi looking around, a couple coming to the same conclusion. The girl from Rain nudged her teammate once more, and the boy from Sand turned around, regarding everyone with his dead green eyes. They'd both figured it out, Sakura was sure. More would follow. She doubted anyone wouldn't understand by the time the test really started. 10 of you will start with scrolls, Choza said, closing his palm. The other 12 will be released into the forest early. You will have 20 minutes to get a head start. 20 minutes to set traps, he meant. Going to the center was pointless if you didn't have a scroll. The test was encouraging teamwork among multiple teams, preparing defenses and ambushes, and advancing into hostile territory, all at the same time. Sakura had to admit it was a little clever. Everyone understand? Great, Choza said, not waiting for an answer. You. He pointed and turned to 10 different people, randomly scattered throughout the crowd. Come forward. Everyone else. He turned and lumbered off towards the main gate that led into the forest, flicking it open. Chunin stepped out from behind it, none Sakura recognized. 1 minute between each. 20 minutes start when the last of you enters. He bowed. Have fun. Of the 10 people called forward, 3 of them were Konohagakure teams. It wasn't an unfair distribution, likely on purpose. Sakura was sure the village didn't want a nasty reputation for rigging the test against foreign genin. She recognized Lee, Hinata, and Shikamaru. The 2 Leaf teams she didn't know, along with her and her teammates, would be getting the head start. A group from the Land of Rivers was the first to leave, immediately leaping up into the enormous trees and vanishing, and Sakura did her best to ignore the butterflies in her stomach. The Rain shinobi that had been watching them were staying behind. They'd been selected for a scroll. The team from Sand, on the other hand, was waiting by the gate with them. The boy with the gourd was only 10 feet away. The moment Sakura began to think she was glad he wasn't acknowledging their existence, he turned around. You, he said, staring at Naruto. His teammates shifted at his side, and he glanced at them. They stilled. You're the Yondaime Hokage's son, aren't you? His eyes gained a spark of life, but somehow that only made them worse. Naruto Namikaze. Dunno any others, Naruto said, crossing his arms, and the boy smiled. I am Gaara, of the desert, he said. His teeth were very white. The son of the Yondaime Kazekage. I'm probably meant to kill you, right? Naruto started, and one of the Chunin stepped forward. All right, too creepy, he said. You guys go into the forest. Get. Team 7 took the invitation gladly, rushing into the forest and following the example set by the team from River. They jumped up into the trees, losing themselves in the canopy. The trees were huge and thick, and the shadows they cast were nearly absolute. What the fuck? Naruto asked when they'd gained a decent amount of distance from the gate, turning back and looking where they'd come from, like he expected Gaara to be right behind them. What was that? He's crazy, Sasuke grunted. We're staying out of his way. I think we can all agree we don't want any of that. They came to rest on a branch, so large and wide that it could have passed for a street if it weren't hundreds of feet in the air. Most of the trees in the forest were founding trees, still green and always growing. Sakura doubted there was another forest like it in the world, but to anyone from Konoha, It would feel familiar, if not friendly. A home field advantage. Crazy doesn't cover it, Naruto muttered. What the hell is the Kazekage teaching his kids? Who knows? Sakura shivered. Sasuke's right. Let's just avoid him. He's not starting with a scroll. Hopefully it will stay that way. So what's the plan? Naruto squatted down on the branch, looking around the forest. Visibility was low, Sakura thought. The trees were so thick and the shadows so thick that you were lucky to have a clear line of sight that went farther than 100 meters. 10 kilometers to the center wasn't far for a shinobi, but it was a lot longer than it seemed in an environment like this. 10 teams with scrolls, Sasuke said to himself, and 3 of them from Konoha. Hinata and Tenten's teams both have the Byakugan, Sakura said. They'd be a big help. If it's possible, we should try to team up with one of them and then track down whatever scroll they don't have. Team 10's probably thinking the same thing, Naruto mused. No, they've got Shikamaru. They're definitely thinking something smarter. They'll probably team up with Guy's team right away and just head right for the tower. Niji's too damn strong for them not to. You're right, Sasuke nodded, and Sakura smiled. There was a simple joy in working together. So, we'll be looking for teammate. They're the most likely candidate. We've got more than 20 minutes, Sakura said. We should get to know the area a little. It's probably going to be chaotic at first, with everyone getting released into the same section. It'll help if we know what's where. Sasuke nodded. Good idea. Stay within sight of each other. Other teams will be showing up soon. We don't want to get in any pointless fights. He pointed a thumb over his shoulder. I'll check by the entrance. He was taking the most dangerous position, Sakura thought. It made sense. Sasuke was the best of them in a one-on-one fight. I'll check around here then, Naruto said. Sakura, you okay with going deeper? She gave him a thumbs up, and he smiled. Awesome. Like Sasuke said, let's stay in sight. They spread out, moving along the trees like bizarre spiders, clinging to the bark with their chakra. Sakura looked around. The forest was like a 3-dimensional maze, both horizontally and vertically, thanks to the sheer number and size of branches that protrude from every tree. Even a normal person without ninja training could probably make it a fair distance into the forest without ever touching the ground. The canopy was that dense. She looked back and found Naruto's blonde hair a reassuring speck of color in the dark greens and grays of the forest. It would be incredibly easy to ambush others and be ambushed in turn in this environment. Sakura could see and hear wildlife as well. Far below, there was crashing as the underbrush was crushed underfoot by something large and fast. The trees were dotted in bits of dead bark and circular holes. Sakura wasn't sure what could have left those, but after some looking she found her answer. A leech the size of her arm with 3 sets of fly-like wings was suckling on a branch below her, blindly gnawing at the bark. Gross. Sakura wasn't sure if those things fed on blood as well, but she wouldn't be surprised. She resolved to avoid them no matter what. Maybe they could be used on another team, though. She wasn't sure what made her look up. It wasn't a definite feeling or instinct. Nothing went through her peripheral vision. It was mostly happenstance. But nonetheless, she jerked her head up and realized someone was watching her. There was a man standing on a branch less than 50 feet away, separated from her by the thick air of the forest. It wasn't another genin. He looked like a Chunin supervisor, Sakura thought. He was wearing the standard uniform and vest of one, though his long black hair kept the uniform from looking purely professional. It was bound up by a leaf hitayate that he wore like a bandana. She was sure there were other ninja in the forest observing the exam. But were they supposed to be seen? Subconsciously, she started reaching for her sword. It was only when her hand settled on the hilt that she started wondering why. Are you Sakura Haruno? The man's voice was gentle, but it carried over the divide effortlessly. Sakura nodded, and he leapt over to her branch, landing without a sound. He was handsome, Sakura thought, despite the deep frown lines that ran down his cheeks. His face reminded her of someone. It was only now that he was closer that she realized that missing 2 fingers from his left hand. His pinky finger was gone entirely, and his ring finger ended at the first joint. He looked like an Uchiha, she realized, and like Sasuke in particular. Not even close to identical, but there was a definite resemblance. Who are you? She asked, not taking her hand off her sword. A proctor, the man said, and Sakura marginally relaxed. He'd startled her, but his voice and mane was calm, maybe even protective. She didn't get any sense of threat from him. I've got something important to tell your team. Would you mind calling them over? The last of the groups have just entered the forest. We won't have much time. Sakura raised an eyebrow. Naruto, she called. Sasuke. Then, more quietly, you're not cheating or something, are you? Because we don't want the help. We can do this on our own. The man laughed. I'm sure you can. Don't worry, I won't help you. Sakura let go of her sword, and Naruto and Sasuke broke through the canopy behind her a second later. Sorry, Sakura. Naruto called, still about 40 feet away. We didn't realize you were out of dash. He stopped, as though he'd run into a wall. Sakura turned, wondering what had happened, and found both Sasuke and Naruto staring at her. Sasuke was turning pale, his mouth moving but nothing coming out. What? She asked. Sasuke, are you alright? Something was wrong. Her skin prickled. She realized she'd turned her back to the man, and found her hand wandering back to her sword. The hair on the back of her neck rose. Her teammate found his voice. What? He said, choking on something invisible. He snarled, and Sakura felt her heart jump at the expression. What are you doing here? A hand gently wrapped around Sakura's arm, and she froze, unable to shift it another inch. She couldn't reach her sword. She couldn't move at all. There was enormous strength in the 3 fingers resting on her. She knew in an instant that if the shinobi wanted to, he could snap her arm without much effort. She looked back, up at the man, and found his eyes swirling and red. They glanced down at her, and then fixed back on Sasuke. A Sharingan. He was an Uchiha. But if he was an Uchiha, Sakura thought, why was he grabbing her? Why was Sasuke so obviously terrified and shaking with rage? What was going on? Just visiting, the Uchiha said. He smiled sincerely. What kind of brother would I be if I didn't check up on you, Sasuke? Let her go, Naruto said. He was scared too, but Sakura was just confused. Sasuke had a brother? He'd never mentioned that to her. No one had. She'd assumed he was an only child, like her and Naruto. Let her go right now. Of course. The hand around Sakura's hand relaxed, but the man spoke again before she could step forward. Don't move, Sakura. She didn't know what started it. She didn't try anything, and she was pretty sure the man behind her didn't move either. But Naruto and Sasuke glanced at one another, and then they both charged forward. It happened so fast that it was only in hindsight that Sakura understood what had happened. Something pushed her forward, not hard enough to hurt, but enough to bring her down. She tumbled across the branch, rolling back to her feet, and the sound of a Rasengan blew past her. Before she could finish her roll, there was a grunt and an explosion, and Sasuke yelled. Sakura came back to her feet, spinning and drawing her sword all in the same motion, and found Sasuke's brother unmoved, about 6 feet away. Naruto was buried in a small crater behind him, stunned and insensible, and Sasuke was face down on the branch, his left arm twisted behind his back. He was squirming, but his brother was kneeling on the small of his back as he held down Sasuke's right arm. He was twisting Sasuke's left farther and farther. Sasuke growled and bucked, but was completely unable to escape. Sakura's eyes went wide, and she raised her sword into a ready position, rushing forward. She led with the blade, transforming her whole body in a spear aiming directly for the Uchiha's neck, and Sasuke's brother glanced at her. He released Sasuke's other arm, but it stayed stuck to the ground, as though his brother's shadow were grabbing it. His hand came up, the sword swept forward. He caught the blade between his thumb and index finger, and Sakura came to an abrupt stop, grunting as her considerable momentum immediately vanished. She almost lost her grip on the hilt. They struggled to pull the blade back to attack again, but it was completely stuck. Itachi, Sasuke shouted. Don't touch dash. Itachi, Sasuke's brother, twisted one more time. Sakura heard a loud, clear snap, and Sasuke screamed, flailing his whole body and kicking at the branch fruitlessly. Naruto was groggily trying to get up, his hands scrabbling at the bark of the crater. You're not ready, Itachi said mildly. He looked down at his brother. Sakura was too afraid to drop her sword and attack without it. What could she do? She'd just end up like her teammates. Still only 2 Tomo? What have you been doing with your time? Sasuke gasped. His arm flopped to his side, and Sakura felt nauseous at its limp movement. "I'm not like you," he said. "Oh," Itachi asked. "Interesting." "You bastard," Sasuke groaned. Itachi pushed Sakura's sword back, releasing it. She should have struck again, but her heart was pounding so hard it felt like her entire body was shaking. She knew without a doubt that if she attacked, Itachi would just break her arm too. Maybe worse. "You should drop out," Itachi said, still sounding like a friendly proctor. Sakura was shaking. How could he sound like that right after breaking his brother's arm? He glanced at Sakura, and then at Naruto, still trying to work up the strength to get out of the crater. "None of you are prepared to be Chunin." "I'm doing this so I could find you," Sasuke said, still breathless with pain. "I need to be strong enough, dash." "Well, I'm here," Itachi said. "And you're not strong enough." There was a silence for a moment, and Sakura lowered her sword, wondering what she should do. Suddenly, Itachi stood up and backed away, jumping over Naruto. Sasuke slowly pulled himself to his feet, and Naruto managed to crawl out of the crater, shaking his head and looking over his shoulder at Itachi. "I will be," Sasuke said, his voice low and full of anger. Itachi considered him. "Acquire the third," he said suddenly. "Is that all you want?" Sasuke said. Sakura thought he sounded as though he might cry. "That's it. My eyes." "You shouldn't listen to mother," Itachi said with a frown. "There's many things I want, but that isn't one of them." He took a step towards the side of the branch. "Remember what I said. Leave the forest. This isn't your time." "Drop dead," Sasuke snarled, and Itachi smiled. "It was nice to see you, Sasuke. Until next time." He stepped off the branch without a sound, plummeting into the forest, and Team 7 was suddenly alone. "Damn it." Sasuke fell to one knee, cradling his broken arm, and Sakura stepped forward, trying to get a better look at it. He swatted her away, a tear in one of his eyes. "Damn it." The splint was primitive, but it was the best Sakura and Naruto could manage. They'd fashioned it from some of the bandages they'd carried with them and two small branches, twigs compared to the trees around them. When it was in place and Sasuke's arm was immobilized, Sakura sat down, trying to figure out what had happened. Naruto sat with her, while Sasuke paced. Both her teammates had obvious bruises as well, Sasuke's on his other arm and Naruto's on his face. Sakura was the only one without a scratch. "We have to go after him," Sasuke said eventually. Sakura looked at his arm, and then at him. "And then what?" Naruto asked. "Get our asses kicked again?" He shook his head. "If we chase him, we'll be giving up the exam. That's just what he wants." "Who cares about the exam?" Sasuke demanded, pacing harder. "He's going to—" He stopped, his face twisting. "I don't know what he's going to do." Sakura sighed. "I don't understand what's happening," she said, and Naruto and Sasuke shared a look. She was reminded of how distant she'd felt when she'd first joined the team. She thought she'd been making inroads with both of them, and with their sensei, but here, now, with Sasuke's arm broken, she felt farther away than ever. "You're just their teammate, not their friend." She tried to crush the thought. It wasn't true. "We never told you about Itachi?" Naruto asked, and Sakura shook her head. He looked dumbstruck. "My brother," Sasuke started, fumbling for the words. "Sakura, that first day, when Obito came to us in the classroom and asked us about ourselves, I said I had something to attend to. Do you remember?" Sakura nodded. She remembered the way Sasuke's face had gone sharp, turning from handsome to hateful for just a second. But she'd never asked. It hadn't been her place. "Maybe they're not your friends because you don't act like they're yours." "Shut up," Sakura told herself. This wasn't the time for that. "When I was 7 years old, Itachi." Sasuke went quiet again, gazing at something Sakura couldn't see. She leaned forward a little, giving him a questioning look, and to her surprise Sasuke took a shuddering breath and remained quiet. "He went crazy," Naruto cut in, and to Sakura it looked like Sasuke was almost grateful. She'd never seen him so uncertain. "He went crazy and killed his dad, and Obito's brother, and a bunch of other Uchiha." He looked to Sasuke like he was asking for permission, and Sasuke nodded, confirming Sakura's suspicion. "Almost half the clan." Sakura had always known that the Uchiha had suffered a tragedy. She'd always known that Sasuke's father was dead. Shinobi dying was a fact of life, and the clan had picked themselves back up and continued on with their lives. Sasuke had been quiet and bad-tempered for a whole year when they were young, and in hindsight she'd assumed that his father had died on a mission and that he'd been struggling with it. The way he'd overcome that sorrow had been what had made him so admirable to her. It's why she'd wanted to be on a team with him all those months ago. But it had been Sasuke's brother? That's horrible, she whispered, and Naruto grimaced in agreement. Sasuke's family thinks that Itachi is going to come back for him, he said as Sasuke continued to stare into the distance. Sakura started as a memory cut across her mind, a serious, burned face regarding her with appraising eyes. I didn't realize. Sasuke's mom told me that. Sakura waved off Naruto's questioning look. Coming back to kill him too? She asked, trying not to think about how horrible the subject matter was. Why wouldn't he have when he was younger? Not to kill me, Sasuke said. He was pale. Sakura wasn't sure if it was because of the conversation or his arm. For my eyes. Sakura paused. You said something about that, she said slowly. You don't mean literally? Sasuke nodded. His pacing had finally stopped. Have you ever wondered about Obito's title? What did that have to do with anything? Mangekyo no Obito? Sakura asked. Not really, she admitted after a moment. I didn't really see what a kaleidoscope had to do with it. I thought it might have to do with his sword and that white chakra it lets off, but I didn't really care. No, she told herself. It just wasn't important. She cared. Why would she think otherwise? He has that name because of his Sharingan, Sasuke said. That weird design his eyes have, that's a Mangekyo Sharingan. It's an evolution of the standard eye. Yeah, Naruto chimed in. 1 Tomo, 2, 3, that's normal. But the Mangekyo dash is something else entirely, Sasuke cut him off. He was a little less pale. Maybe talking was helping him take his mind off his arm. Only the most elite, like Obito and Itachi, can evolve it. But once you do, anytime you use your Sharingan, you start to go more and more blind. His lips twisted. This all used to be really secret clan stuff. But after Obito, it got out in the open during the Third War. I don't know how. But if Sensei got his Mangekyo Sharingan that long ago, why isn't he blind? Sakura asked. Something wasn't adding up here. And how do you even know Itachi has a Mangekyo? Sasuke's mom and Obito both say so. And that's why Sasuke's family is worried about Itachi coming after him, Naruto said. I think I know why Obito isn't blind, Sasuke continued, clearly resisting the urge to start pacing again. If someone with the Mangekyo Sharingan implants the eyes of a close relative, ideally a sibling, those eyes will never degrade, while retaining the power of the old ones. He sounded like he was reciting something, Sakura thought. She got the feeling Sasuke had had this rehearsed to him several times. So, super gross. Obito probably has his brother's eyes, Naruto said with a dour look. And the reason Itachi wants you to unlock a third Tomo. Sakura murmured, and Sasuke nodded. So that he can take my fully developed eyes, he said. That's what mother thinks. That's so creepy. Sakura couldn't think of anything better to say, and Naruto laughed at her bluntness. Yeah, he's a creep, he said. You saw that? He'd have to be, to kill his own family like that. He glanced at Sasuke. We always figured he'd come after us. Just not so soon. He frowned. I'm really sorry we didn't tell you. Maybe if Dash. Don't worry about that, Sakura said. That's not what we should worry about right now. Yeah, Naruto acknowledged. I guess the real thing is if we should keep going or not. Sasuke sighed. You were right, Naruto. We can't catch up with him, he said, grimacing. Even if we'd chased him right away. He was always too fast. If he was going to kill anyone else, he would have done it before coming here. And if he's going after anyone, he'd get to them before we could. He sighed. I think he was being honest. He's just here for me. Then, he asked you to drop out, Sakura said. Do you think he meant it? No, Sasuke said. I don't know if it was reverse psychology or something else, but if he really wanted me to drop out, he would have done worse than break my arm. He rubbed his shoulder, wincing. He might not even have left. He might just be watching us, seeing what I'll do. Sakura tried not to show just how disconcerting she found that idea. He wants you to keep going, I bet, Naruto said with what he probably thought was a sage nod. There's no way he'd think you'd actually listen to him. You develop more Tomo from challenges, right? From being stressed out. Sasuke nodded, and Naruto grinned. Well, Doing the Chunin exam with a broken arm would definitely be that. This was all a game, Sakura thought. Sasuke's brother was playing a game with them. Now that Sasuke had raised the possibility, she was sure they were being watched, but she had no way of knowing if that was her instincts or just paranoia. In a forest like this, which had just filled up with over 60 ninja, more than just Itachi could be watching them. So, we should play along then, she said. Keep going, if that's what he wants. If that is what he wants, Sasuke repeated quietly. He could have really thought we should drop out. If he thought that, fuck him, Naruto declared, shooting to his feet. Sakura and I are both still fine, and you've still got one arm. We can still do this. What a contrast, Sakura thought. Naruto was always like that. He might have been hesitant to start the exam, but now that he was here, he was going to give 110%. It was definitely one of his most admirable qualities. She smiled and stood up as well. It's up to you, Sasuke, she said. You're the one who's hurt. Sasuke looked at the both of them, and then out to the forest. TCH. He grunted, his nostrils flaring. Naruto's right. Fuck him. Sakura giggled. She'd never heard Sasuke swear before. If we're going to drop out, we should at least drop out trying. Team 7 set out in search of Team 8, sticking to the treetops as they scanned the training ground. They didn't see any other competitors, but every once in a while, they could hear them. Distant yelling, the occasional scuffle, and once an explosion, either a jutsu or a detonating tag. Naruto had tied a message around his arm, written on a piece of bandage, Hinata. They'd hoped that the Byakugan would pick it up and that the other Leaf team would come to them. That hadn't happened. 2 hours into the second test, Team 7 still hadn't seen a single other shinobi. Plenty of animals, including bugs the size of a grown man's arms and birds bigger than couches that hunted them, but no Genin. We should start heading for the center, Sasuke said. He held his arm stiffly at his side. Sakura had seen him wince once or twice as they'd leapt from tree to tree, and it had jostled against him. It's been too long. People are probably already heading towards the tower. Yeah, Naruto agreed, and Sakura nodded. If they weren't finding anyone or being found in turn, the main groups of teams must have already made their way past them. They'd been given 2 days to complete the test, but for most people, it wouldn't take nearly that long. They turned north, orienting towards the center of the forest, and moved off more slowly than they had before. They'd been skirting the southern edge of the training ground, hoping to catch anyone lingering near the entrances. By moving towards the center, they were advancing into potentially hostile territory. Without actively communicating, they fell into a standard triangular formation, with Naruto and Sakura at the front and Sasuke covering their rear, keeping about 10 meters apart as they advanced through the canopy. The forest was an amazing place, Sakura thought. It was both deceptively huge and amazingly dark. It was around noon, when it should have been brightest, but only a fraction of the sunlight managed to penetrate the enormous trees around them. Konoha might not have been so hidden anymore thanks to the demands of a modern industry and a population that enjoyed things like plastic and instant ramen. But when it had first been founded decades ago, it must have been impossible to find the village hidden in the leaves unless you knew exactly where to look. It was strange that the hidden villages were no longer truly hidden, that they were known factors that everyone planned for and understood, that were important parts of their nation's government, Sakura thought. She wasn't smart enough to call that good or bad, silly or normal, just strange. Hold up. Naruto raised one of his hands, and Sakura and Sasuke both came to an immediate stop, resting against the sides of the trees closest to them. Sakura felt her chakra work its way into the bark of the tree, anchoring her in place, and marveled that something that had been so alien to her just months ago was now totally second nature. She hadn't even thought about sticking to the surface, she just had. Down below, Naruto whispered, and Sakura followed his line of sight just in time to catch a flicker of movement, black against the shadows of the forest. Someone had just relocated, about 80 meters away and 30 down. I think they saw us. We don't have a scroll, Sakura said. Why would they bother us? They don't know that, Sasuke said quietly, and Sakura resisted the urge to slap herself. Duh, how would they have known that? Any team was a potentially valuable target more than 2 hours in. There was no guarantee people who'd started without scrolls still didn't have any. or vice versa. What should we do? Naruto asked, and Sakura considered the problem. By now, that shinobi they'd seen could be anywhere. Go up, she asked. Harder to get surrounded that way. Sasuke shook his head. And easier to get cornered, he muttered, peeling his upper body off his tree. Use me. What do you mean? Naruto asked, and Sasuke stared at him like he was an idiot. As bait, he said with a smirk, shifting his broken arms slightly for emphasis. I'm a good target. I'll go out ahead and try to get them to jump. Then, you guys jump them. That's dangerous. Sakura frowned, and Sasuke shrugged. Better than just waiting here. Sound good. Naruto and Sakura shared a glance, and Naruto sighed. Just be careful, okay? He said, and Sasuke grinned back. Of course, he said, and then he was off, tearing through the forest without looking back and descending in altitude. He can make a lot of noise, Naruto admitted. He was right. Sasuke wasn't dampening his footsteps with chakra, and he was raising a veritable cacophony, leaping from tree to tree and tearing through smaller branches. There was no way the other team wouldn't notice him. I thought that was my thing. Well, maybe you can show him how it's done after this, Sakura said, and Naruto grinned at her. Come on, let's follow him. They went after Sasuke, silent and invisible in the trees, keeping about 100 meters behind their teammate. The subdued chase continued for about 30 seconds, and then Sasuke came to a stop. Sakura strained to see why through the cover provided by the trees, and found Sasuke perched on a branch, looking at something she couldn't see. His mouth was moving. She was pretty sure he was speaking with someone. The way he held himself told her he wasn't frightened, but he was alert. The person who Naruto had seen, or one of their teammates, had probably confronted him. Let's go around, she told Naruto, and he nodded as they changed directions, heading towards whoever Sasuke was speaking with. They went in a slight arc, so they'd approach from the rear. Where's the rest of you? She heard Sasuke say, his voice faint, when they were within 50 meters. They're around. Sakura thought she recognized the voice that answered. It was a boy, a cocky one. It wasn't someone she knew, but the tone was familiar. What about yours? They're around, Sasuke retorted, and there was a rustle of leaves. Sakura came out from behind a tree and finally saw who he was speaking with. It was the boy from Rain, the one with shark teeth. The Aim was standing on a branch above Sasuke, looking down at him with his arms crossed. His teammates were nowhere in sight. Sounds likely. The boy couldn't see Sakura and Naruto approaching from behind him, fixated on Sasuke. Sakura looked at Naruto, tapping the hilt of her sword, and she was pretty sure he understood right away. If she was the one to attack, she might kill him, and they didn't want that. Taking him down was going to be Naruto's responsibility. You're probably bait, right, Dash? Naruto pushed off his tree, hard, to cover the last 30 meters, and the enemy shinobi must have heard something. He turned around just in time for Naruto's foot to connect with his neck. To his credit, Naruto didn't yell gotcha, or anything else that Sakura had expected him to say. But that was probably because when his kick took the Aim in the throat, the boy's upper body exploded into water. So instead of knocking the shinobi out, Naruto let out a surprised yelp and soared straight through his opponent, over Sasuke, and directly into an inconveniently placed tree, burying his foot in its bark. Wow! The boy uncrossed his arms and laughed, looking back to Naruto. He hadn't seen Sakura. She unsheathed her sword, mind whirling. Was he a clone made of water, or was that some sort of jutsu? Either way, he probably wouldn't die if she cut him. Her knuckles went white as her grip tightened. Little dramatic, don't you think? Sakura didn't make a sound. She just leapt and swung in the same motion, landing on the tree besides the boy and spinning to face him. He glanced at her, and his head fell off. Sakura had thought that maybe if she'd separated his head, he wouldn't be able to pull the same trick, but that wasn't the case. He caught it in one hand before it could hit the branch. Huh, it is you guys, he said, raising it back up and making an exaggerated motion of screwing it back onto his neck. His body flowed, melting into water for a second, and then solidifying once more. I told you, Leaf Shinobi got no idea how to treat guests. You're made of water? Naruto shouted, struggling to free his foot from the tree. That's not fair. There's no such thing as fair when it comes to shinobi. Another voice came from higher above them, and Sakura glanced up to find one of the boy's teammates looking down at them, the boy with gray hair and glasses. He smirked. That was a good attempt, though. He'd be unconscious and dead if he weren't cheating. They were in trouble. Sakura backed up, raising her sword. One opponent right in front of her, another above and to the right, and the third one nowhere to be seen. Her hand was shaking a little, and she placed her other one on the sword as well, steadying it. "We don't have a scroll," she said, and the boy grinned. "If that's what you're wondering, there's no point in us fighting." "I already told him," Sasuke said. "Apparently, they don't care." "It's true." Sakura spun. There was a new voice, soft and gentle, coming from right behind her. She jumped away, down to Sasuke's branch, and put her back to him, looking up where she'd come from. The third Ray ninja was there, the one with the black and red Haori. She looked down at them, her brown eyes sharp. "We don't care if you have a scroll." She smiled, and to Sakura it seemed totally genuine. "In fact, it's lucky that you don't." "What do you mean?" Naruto had finally gotten his leg unstuck, and he was standing on the side of the tree, rotating to keep all three of the enemy ninja in view. What were their odds? Sakura wondered. They clearly just wanted to fight. The guy made of water would have to be Sasuke's problem. He was the only one with fire jutsu. What if the others? Her train of thought was entirely derailed, in the same manner of something falling off a table and exploding when it hit the ground, when the girl above them took something out of the folds of her Haori and tossed it down to them. Sasuke caught it instinctively with his unbroken arm, and he and Sakura glanced at it, neither able to believe what they were seeing. It was a scroll, emblazoned with the symbol of heaven. "What?" Sasuke asked, looking at the scroll again and then up at the Rain Ninja. The boy smirked at him. "What?" he asked again. "Why?" "We were lucky enough to come into 2 scrolls early on," the boy with glasses said, leaping down to join his teammates. He produced an earth scroll with a grin. "But it's not much good to have both without someone to hand it in with, is it?" "You didn't work with the team that had the other?" Sasuke asked suspiciously, and the girl shrugged. "They didn't want to cooperate," she said. "We thought it would be simpler to find someone who would." "Lucky you." The other boy smiled, revealing his shark teeth. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, getting to team up with us. We're going to pass this exam for sure. You going to be smart enough to take it?" "What if you just take us out like you did the other team?" Naruto asked, narrowing his eyes, and the girl laughed. "We could," she said. "It would be easy, with one of you hurt." "Sasuke Uchiha, right?" Sasuke started at his name, and the girl waved him off. "Don't worry. You're a little famous, you know. Who managed to break your arm like that?" "Doesn't matter," Sasuke said, and the girl shrugged. "Kabuto?" she asked, and the boy with glasses jumped down to their branch. Sakura leveled her sword at him, and he raised his hands with a disarming grin. "Look, no funny business, all right," he said, showing his empty hands. That didn't mean anything. A ninja's hands could be their deadliest weapon. He walked forward slowly. "Put it to my neck if you want. I don't really care." He looked at Sasuke. "Do you mind if I take a look at your arm?" Sasuke glanced at her, and Sakura took Kabuto's advice, putting her sword to his neck. He just shrugged. What if he was made of water too? Even if he wasn't, could she cut someone's head off knowing for sure it would kill them? Sakura wasn't sure she had it in her. Kabuto continued to walk slowly forward. "I'm not going to touch you," he said. "I've got medical training. We just want to show we're serious. If you consider teaming up, I'll fix up that arm for you." Sasuke frowned suspiciously. "Prove it." "You heard him," Naruto threatened from above, "and I'll smash you into a million pieces." "I wouldn't dream of it," Kabuto said, and Sakura had no idea if he was being sarcastic or not. He gingerly reached out, looking at Sasuke for permission, and hesitatingly, Sakura's teammate extended his broken arm. Kabuto ran his hand over it, a faint green glow issuing from his palm. "It's a clean break," he muttered after a second. "It would heal quickly even without my help." He looked up. "Do you mind if I touch it?" "If you want. Remember, you've got a sword at your neck," Sasuke said, and Kabuto laughed, glancing at Sakura. "Hard to forget. Steady hands, though. Have you ever cut someone with that?" Sakura didn't answer. If she lied, she'd look like a fool. If she told the truth, it would be even worse. Kabuto didn't seem to mind the lack of response. He reached out with both hands, fingers making contact with Sasuke's skin, and the Uchiha flinched. The Rain Shinobi's palms began glowing again, and he traced them up and down Sasuke's arm, leaving trails of iridescent green chakra that sunk into Sasuke's skin. "Does it hurt?" Sakura asked. She'd never seen medical jutsu before. Sasuke shook his head. "It's warm," he said. "I think." "Just give me a minute," Kabuto said, and Sasuke did, letting him run his hand up and down the arm twice more, focusing on the elbow. "Okay." He released Sasuke's arm and then, to Sakura's shock, gave it a slap. Her teammate barely reacted. "Any pain?" "No," Sasuke said. "Doesn't hurt at all." "Cool." Kabuto grinned. "Good as new then." "That's totally amazing." Naruto had been watching the whole thing with wide eyes, and now he was smiling, totally taken in by the display. "Hey, thanks. If you're being serious, we'll be happy to team up with you guys." "Naruto," Sakura shouted up at him, and he looked down at her with a confused expression. "Are you sure about that?" "If they're willing to fix Sasuke," Naruto said, "why shouldn't we?" "You want to pass, right?" the other boy from Rain said. "You shouldn't stick your nose up at help." Sakura looked back and forth between both her teammates. Naruto was enthusiastic, but Sasuke was just quiet. He was probably thinking the same thing as her, she thought. Even if this was some sort of trick, they could at least use this team to get themselves farther. Just fighting them and taking both their scrolls wouldn't be the smart move. There was no guarantee they'd win. Passing with the team from Rain would be better than losing without them. "All right," she decided after a moment, lowering her sword from Kabuto's neck. He adjusted his glasses, still looking unruffled. "Sorry about that." "Nothing to apologize for," he said good-naturedly. "I'm sure I would have done the same thing, in your situation." He stuck out his hand, open and inviting. "Want to start over?" Sakura regarded his hand, but Sasuke was the first to take it. "Sasuke Uchiha," he said, "though it sounds like you already know me." "Kabuto Yakushi," Kabuto said with a firm shake. "It's a pleasure, Sasuke." He pointed up at his teammates. "My friends up there dash." "Suigesta Hozuki," the other boy called down with a grin. "You can let me introduce myself, you know." Kabuto laughed. "Of course. My apologies." He surrendered with an overly dramatic wave of his hand. "I'm Naruto Namikaze," Sakura's teammate called out. "And she's Sakura Haruno." He looked at the last Rain ninja, waiting for a name. "And what about you?" The girl gave him a gentle smile. "I am Haku Yuki," she said. "It's nice to meet you all. I hope we can complete this together." Haku. That was the name of the shinobi who'd been watching them since before the first test. She seemed kind, but looking around, Sakura was sure that them meeting up more than 2 hours into the test like this wasn't a coincidence. The team from Rain had already had both scrolls. It was like they'd been looking for them. That couldn't be it, right? There was no way they could have known the second test would involve working with another team ahead of time. But maybe once they had. Who would want to team up with you? "Sakura?" Naruto asked. "You all right?" "Yeah," she said. "Yeah." She tried to smile. "It's nice to meet you all." "Likewise," Haku said. She gestured to the east. "There's a river heading north. We think towards the tower at the center. We were following it before we ran into you. Shall we?" Sasuke nodded, and Team 7 left with the team from Rain, making their way towards the river and an uncertain future.